All right, thank you everybody for coming here in this evening. And it looks like we got our technical difficulties kind of ironed out. Hopefully we can get this going. I can see Sheriff John D'Agostini up there on the screen, and he will be standing by to make a presentation. It's going to be probably about 45 minutes or so before we get to that point. Is that going to work okay for you? Sheriff, can you hear me? Okay. All right. All right, we're going to get going while they work on that. Let's see here. Go ahead and bring this meeting to order at about 13 after 5 o'clock. And if you would all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Much better. Still.
Sound coordinated.
All right. Miss O'Connell. You're mixing it up here a little bit. All right, roll call, please.
Councilmember Burley.
Here.
Vice Mayor Taylor.
Here.
Mayor Thomas.
Here.
Councilmember Saragosa.
Here.
Councilmember No.
Here.
All right, we have no ceremonial matters, and the city attorney. By the way, we have our new city attorney, Mona Ebrahimi, and she is joining us for the first time today up on the dais. And if you could please give us our closed session report.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. The council did meet in closed session on labor negotiations and provided direction to staff.
All right. Thank you very much. Moving on, if we can, so with the adoption of the agenda, I would like to move item 12.3 up to 12.1 and bump those two down. And if we can get a motion.
I'll
with
move.
that.
I'll move for the.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. Moving on. Item number 6, brief comments from city council. Let's start with Councilmember Borelli.
Well, I had a busy time with meetings. I was LAFCO and Transit and Transportation and Fire Safe Councils and National Night Out.
And National Night Out. Yes. All right, Vice Mayor Taylor.
I enjoy National Night Out, and I want to thank Sergeant Pratt and the police department and all of the party hosts. It was just great to see neighborhoods coming out together and, eating hot dogs and enjoying a summer evening. And it was a really nice event. And then we had our 2x2 meeting with the county, which we'll be discussing later on in the agenda. So no other comments on that right now.
All right, thank you. Councilmember? No.
I don't have any comments.
All right. Michael?
Just same, National Night Out. Just want to thank the police department for all their work putting everything together, and for Commander Muser for driving Dave and I around in the new Tesla, which really does not have anything inside of it except for one computer screen. So, what was that? Nope.
Well, yes, John, we can hear you.
We can hear you, Sheriff.
Yes. Nope, you're not.
We're making progress, though.
All right.
And just, again, I just want to thank the community for coming out. It's always a great event for Placerville, so thanks, everybody.
I'm not going to do this in one breath, but I'll get through this pretty quick. I met with Marshall Hospital for a short while talking about their participation in homeless and how they are interacting with those, just to get a sense of where they're at. I met with El Dorado County Transportation Commission, and we discussed, I wanted to get a better idea of what the outreach was looking like for the trip to green, or whatever. What are we calling it now? We got it. There's an official name.
The 50 fix.
The two changed to a the. Trip the green.
Trip the Green. So met with them to kind of hash out some of their outreach and kind of dig in a little bit about the participation from the city and how that's going to interact with what they're doing. I thought that was really important. We had the 2x2, which was a really good meeting to kind of dig in and kind of hash out some of the details, not really details even, just kind of hash out some of the challenges with the homeless and look at opportunities. And it was a good meeting. Went to an Ag in the Classroom event up at Rainbow Orchard, which was a fun deal, supporting the Ag in the Classroom. Met with the chief in Upper Room and discussed some of their participation with, how it looks going forward and just kind of ballpark some stuff, and really appreciated Charlie with that. Another thing I went to is St. John's fundraiser, which is a great program down in Sacramento for women in homelessness, that they see women all the way from drug addiction to right off the street to all the way to getting housing and training and moving them into a productive life with their families and their kids. Great, amazing program. I plan on going down there and touring that again at some point. Great program. And then National Night Out. And National Night Out we had a great, I was with the chief, our District 3 supervisor, if you don't know her, Wendy Thomas, and in Cleve, and we traveled around and really had some great conversations with a couple different groups of locals, and they had great questions and a lot of good discussion on what's really going on, and they were really engaged, and it was refreshing to hear, just a great discussion on our community and where we're at. And then also, Chief, doggone it, I just lost it all of a sudden. Cordero, thank you. Cordero, thank you, sorry about that. Shepherd was out, and Luke Shepherd was out doing a great presentation, because one of the places we went to was right next to where the fire occurred up on Quartz Mountain. And those people were really worried, a lot of issues regarding traffic and fire and communication and all these things. And they did a great job of outlining and kind of detailing what the participation is on the county fire and city police and how we work together in terms of that communication. And it was a great kind of a wake-up call for people to understand what they need to do, as well as how they interact with the police and fire. So he did a great job. I really appreciated hearing all the things that he was providing. He did a great job of just laying it all out for them. So with that, I'm done with public comment. I mean, not public comment, council comment. And presentations, and we're moving on to Mr. Rivas, and presentation of City Council Broadway Corridor Housing Opportunity Analysis Scope of Work with Civic Lab. And this thing, actually, I'm going to recuse myself, because this particular item is occurring around property that I own or family owns, so we want to not be involved with this conversation. So I'm going to step out for a moment until this is done. We'll see you in a little bit.
Thank you, members of the council. Staff is pleased to present to the City Council the proposed scope of work prepared by Economic and Planning Systems and Ascent Environmental for the preparation of a housing opportunities analysis of the Broadway corridor. So I'm going to give a little history, because this has been a very long, ongoing process concerning Broadway. So going back to December of 2018, the Sacramento Area Council of Governments selected 12 commercial corridors within the Sacramento region to participate in SACOG's Civic Lab 2 program. The task was to focus on addressing barriers to infill development, placemaking, private investment opportunities, and otherwise revitalize these 12 commercial corridors throughout the SACOG region. The Placerville's Broadway corridor was one of the 12 corridors selected to participate in the Civic Lab program. Participation in the program provided for a comprehensive review of the corridor, past planning efforts such as the Broadway Village Corridor Multimodal Implementation Plan that was prepared in 2010, and consultation with various consultants, recommendations from private representatives from housing, commercial real estate, finance, transportation, urban design professionals, and to learn more from the other participating jurisdictions. SACOG facilitated these workshops beginning in January of 2019 meeting, which would be on the third Wednesday of each month, and the process concluded on October of 2019. Subsequently, in April of 2020, SACOG presented the city with a $20,000 Rural Main Streets Technical Assistance Grant to further assist with making efforts, including the preparation of a landscaping plan and identification signage for the Broadway corridor. With the assistance of the Local Government Commission, a landscape and gateway treatments plan was developed for the Broadway corridor. A public workshop via virtual Zoom was conducted on August 3rd of 2020 to receive comments from the public and businesses regarding the landscape and gateway treatments based on recommendations in the Broadway Village Corridor Multimodal Implementation Plan. The Placerville Economic Advisory Committee served as a venue for the review of the draft work products. The final product included a final planting plan, a Broadway corridor gateway sign, and cost estimates. So following this effort, those jurisdictions that participated in the Civic Lab program were awarded REAP funds to develop a project for their respective commercial corridor that are related to housing. Placerville is being provided $100,000 in REAP funds from SACOG to fund a project to assist with furthering housing along the Broadway corridor. SACOG has developed a pre-approved consultant list that allowed SACOG staff to select a consultant or consultants that would best align with the planning effort desired for the Broadway corridor. A scope of work that you have attached to your staff report was developed by Economic and Planning Systems and Ascent Environmental to prepare a housing opportunities analysis for the Broadway corridor. The scope of work was prepared based on the following objectives, and I'm quoting this objective from the scope of work. It's to identify suitable housing prototypes for the Broadway corridor with consideration to available opportunity sites and market demand. Evaluate financial feasibility of preferred development prototypes and establish strategies and recommendations to overcome any identified regulatory or economic hurdles to catalyze infill housing along the corridor. So looking at the scope of work, it details 9 tasks that are described, deliverables leading to the preparation of the Broadway Corridor Housing Opportunities Report for use by the city, and that also includes a PowerPoint presentation for public hearings. So I'll briefly go over the 9 tasks. Task 1 would be a kickoff and site visit where the consultants will meet with staff and then visit the corridor. Task 2 is a review of the existing economic and demographic information and market area, housing market and production conditions evaluation. And we would, out of that effort, we would get a baseline market and economic conditions memorandum. Task number 3 would be a review of the local land use regulations, including the city's general plan, zoning, and housing element, which of course we're currently updating. We're in the cycle 6. The deliverable would be a land use regulatory memorandum. Task 4 is an opportunity site selection process to review potential sites for mixed-use development. And the deliverable for that task would be a site selection and opportunities site diagram or map. Task 5 is to prepare housing prototypes and development and opportunity site evaluation. And this will include development of 3D building prototypes to show massing diagrams and development standards, these being setbacks, building height, density, parking requirements, and the like. The deliverable would be housing prototypes and a site evaluation memorandum and a PowerPoint presentation. Task 6, development feasibility. That would be to evaluate the financial feasibility of development of the opportunity sites that were previously identified. Then we have task 7, strategies and recommendations. So with this task, these will be actions and recommendations to facilitate the production of housing. And this could include development of guidelines, public improvements, incentives, and other programs that the city could engage in following this analysis. Task 8 is the actual preparation of the draft Broadway Corridor Housing Opportunities Report for city review and comment, and then followed by a final report. Task 9 then would be the PowerPoint presentation and holding of a public meeting. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions the council may have at this time.
Thank you, Pierre. Bringing it back to council, does anyone have any questions or comments on this? No?
No, I'm just happy that SACOG we were able to get the funding to kind of continue this on. It sort of had stalled for a little bit until new funding was identified. So happy that this is moving forward. I did have one question for Pierre. You know, as this moves forward and the idea of, you know, where you have a mixed development, is this something that would require zoning changes in terms of having that mixed-use development on Broadway? Or is that something that's already allowed in that corridor currently?
Our zoning ordinance currently provides for mixed-use development as long as the housing component is below or above the ground level
So
in
attached.
commercial districts. But as I mentioned earlier, one of the tasks would be a comprehensive review of all of our regulatory apparatus. So that's general plan, zoning, they'll take a look at our housing element. And if there's anything we need to look at or tweak to further housing, we'll be looking at, they'll be giving us recommendations on doing that.
Okay. And then is the terminus Schnell Street, Schnell School Road, or is it all the way, or is it further down?
We're going to go all the way down to Carriage Trade Center.
Okay, great. All right, thank you.
All right, I don't have any, well, actually, I do have one question. What's the timeline for when we can get the final presentations?
Let me see, that should be in there.
It's on the back page, Pierre, of the scope of work.
Oh, 4 to 6 months, I
Schedule.
see it.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I think that this is a really exciting project, and I'm glad to see this. And I think it's great that we're not having to spend any of our local funds on this analysis. And so thank you to SACOG and everyone that's worked really hard on the Broadway corridor and having this come forward. It would be really awesome if this has the potential to address housing that's in the missing middle. I think that Broadway has a huge amount of potential for that over there. So it will be exciting to see what comes out of this. All right.
Pierre, could you kind of give us just maybe one, say, for an idea, one site that would maybe to try to tell how we would have housing on Broadway?
Well, we actually looked at a couple of sites. So this is early on in our process. During our civic lab, there were a number of site visits that were made with staff, with various consultants, and then we also met with some of the property owners. So we did receive some interest from property owners to actually redeveloping their sites. A lot of those buildings are, 1950s, 1960s development where there probably is not the feasibility of actually creating a second or third floor on some of these existing buildings. And so I think one of the things, at least I was happy to see in this proposal, is a real hard look at the financials to look at making redevelopment of some of these areas feasible. It may mean raising the buildings and then rebuilding from scratch.
So the grant and everything that we're getting would pay the folks that are up there, the property owners, that it would assist them, or are they going to have to participate also in financial?
Well, this is actually just a report to the city and I guess
I
as well
realize
to the
that.
property owners. So
But I mean,
it's
I wonder
basically
what
looking.
the incentive is, I mean, for them to,
Right, they'll be providing recommendations.
Okay.
And both that include incentives. Maybe the city has a way of providing incentives to the property owners.
Okay.
So that's all part of this report that they're going to prepare for us. Will be what kind of, at first identifying constraints, both from a regulatory point of view and are there financial constraints too that may be overcome. And then they're going to provide hopefully some recommendations on how to make this happen.
Sounds great to me. Thank you.
Thanks again for the report. I think we can let the mayor. Oh, thank you. I'd like to open this up to the public for public comment.
And good evening, Mayor, or Vice Mayor, and Council. And I'm really glad to see this. One of the things that I didn't catch from the report was, what are the boundaries? How much of Broadway does this cover? How far up and down does it go? And I wanted to know, does it address the homeless problem up there and the upper room as well? So those are my questions.
Thank you, Sue.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, I mean, I'm glad that this is a study because we do have to ask people that live in this area directly close, do we want this? We already have major traffic issues right now. So I'm not against it necessarily, but we would have to seriously address traffic. Like that could be, I mean, I don't know how many apartments or houses you're planning on putting there. Also, I'm a big believer in generational wealth, right? And not leaving out the people, like Kara said, in the middle. And so, if this is just going to be more low-income housing, it leaves out a lot of people. So also, there's that big area down by Placerville Drive. That's a big lot. It's been for sale for a long time. It would make a great apartments or something like that. We definitely need housing. People are just dying for housing right now. And what is in it for the developers? Who will be the developers? And will our local officials be benefiting personally from this?
Thank you.
Good evening, Kathy Lishman, city resident. I think this is a wonderful idea, and one of the ideas of combining housing in a commercial center is that you make the area more walkable, and a lot of the people that live there will be walking a lot. And so I think that this is something that has really worked out well in other communities, and I'm excited and anxious to see how it works out in the city. Thank you. I also wanted to say, when the sheriff does his presentation, if you could turn the lights down up there so that we could see better. And I wanted to welcome the new city attorney. I know it's Mona. I don't want to butcher your last name, but welcome. We're happy to have you.
Thank you, Kathy. All right, seeing no more public comment, we can let the mayor know that he can come back in.
You want to answer the question?
Pierre, would you like to answer some of the questions from Sue and the other speakers?
Sure. I think Sue asked for the boundaries. So the boundaries would start at Mosquito and Broadway and then go east to the Carriage Trade Center. And then there was a question, I guess, about is it going to address the homeless? It is not. It's a financial feasibility study on mixed-use development, commercial and housing. So it's not targeting any particular, homeless housing or transitional housing or that sort of thing. And those are the two questions I recall. If there's any others, happy to answer them.
Income level? What, the income?
Of
The housing?
Yeah, is there specific income levels for the housing, but
No, it's basically looking at just the basic economics of being able to develop mixed-use housing. So I don't think it's getting into that level of detail. Just so everybody knows and the council knows, we're just about completed our Cycle 6 housing element update, which does address the homeless, does address low income, very low income, and all the different income categories. So I would direct anybody that's really interested in housing to going online and reviewing our draft Cycle 6 housing element. Submit comments to us.
all right, thank you.
In terms of not financial incentives, but really as a way for the market to look at some of these things, we did look at in the Policy and Innovation Committee at SACOG, AB, I believe it was 1401, And essentially, while it didn't affect Placerville directly, because it's really for transportation corridors, larger cities, but it would waive sort of the minimum requirements for parking, and really to show that if a builder could build it and the market wanted something like that, then you could reduce sort of those VMTs in cars in more walkable communities. So again, not really affecting us, but certainly something that other jurisdictions could look at as well. Bill's moving through and had a lot of different iterations so far, but you know, places like Citrus Heights and Sacramento, others would have a direct impact on them. And that bill did pass out unanimously from the P&I committee as a support position from SACOG that'll go to the full board.
Kara, so the one lady asked about the traffic, the increase in what, but I'm thinking that what Michael just said, that since this is proposed in a walkable area, that you're not anticipating the amount of traffic. Is that true? Is that going to be addressed?
I would say at that level of detail, the answer is probably no. It's looking more at the feasibility of being able to implement mixed use. This isn't a project specific, so we're not doing any project specific environmental analysis of the project. It's basically trying to determine whether or not it's even feasible from a market standpoint and a financial feasibility standpoint. Because if you're looking at something that is an exorbitant cost to raise a building and build a mixed use development, then is there the demand and the market to support it? And so that's why we've hired EPS, Economic Planning Systems, to do that analysis, because early on in the Civic Lab process, we met with some of the property owners that were interested in mixed use. And so this will help the city and the property owner to be able to determine whether or not they want to move forward with actually doing some kind of development, because they can build something and they will come.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say this is like the beginning of the third inning on this type of project.
Exactly. Just a couple of things to add to that, Pierre. However, if a project does come forward and goes through that further review, it will require traffic analysis and et cetera during that process. And I think one of the questions was, you know, something about the developers. We have no idea who developers might be for this at this point. This is very early and just looking at the feasibility, and then we would work with property owners on their own to develop and to work with potential developers that might come forward to work with them. So.
All right. Any other comments from council? Okay. I think we can let the mayor know.
So you all done?
All done.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much for taking care of that. And moving on to item number 7, consent calendar. All matters listed on the consent calendar are considered routine and will be enacted by one motion, roll call vote, unless any member of the council wishes to remove an item for discussion. The reading of the full text of all resolutions will be waived unless a council member requests otherwise. And I believe you had something?
Yes, so I'll move the consent calendar, but I'd like to pull item 7.7. However, I know we have the sheriff waiting, so if we want, if the council agrees, we could keep 7.7 until after we do 12 point whatever. That way we're not keeping the sheriff waiting longer.
Sure.
And I'll second the motion with that caveat.
Okay.
And I need to abstain from 7.1 since I was not at the last meeting, but
Oh, for the minutes?
yeah, for the minutes.
All right. Perfect.
But I'm in favor of everything
Yeah.
else.
Okay.
We have a first and a second, so.
All right, roll call. Let's for clarity, we're going to push 7.7 to 12.4. All right. Actually, that is not correct, because we're going to, let's see, where is it at? I move item number 9 to item number 12.4. Okay. All right, so can we get a roll call vote, please?
There's no public comment on consent?
Oh, thank you.
We keep forgetting that.
I did. We usually do it in, we kind of had this discussion last time.
I'm earning my keep.
Yes, all right. All right. Thank you very much. If there's any, we're going to, let's see. We're going to open up public comment for item 7, consent calendar.
Sue Rodman, Placerville resident, and come to these meetings a lot. And I am really glad to see projects that have already been through previous council meetings, already been approved, that are now ready to go, get moved from having to go through it a third time or so, and get onto the consent calendar. For example, paving Middletown Road and getting police cruisers. We've been through that before. We really don't need to have it again. So it's really nice to see some of these things move to the consent calendar. And it might even shorten up our city council meetings a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Anyone else for public comment on item 7? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close public comment at this time. Bring it back for a roll call vote now, please.
Councilmember Burley.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Taylor.
Aye.
Mayor Thomas.
Aye.
Councilmember Zaragoza.
Aye.
Councilmember No.
Aye.
All right, thank you very much. Moving on to item 8, public comments, non-agendized items. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the council on any matter not on the agenda that is within the subject matter and jurisdiction of the city council. State law prohibits the council from taking action on any items not listed on the agenda except by special action of the city council under specific circumstances. The mayor reserves the right to limit the speaker's time to 3 minutes. You are not allowed to make personal attacks on individuals or make comments which are slanderous or which may invade an individual's personal privacy. And with that, we'll go ahead and open up for public comment. Yes, sir. Gotcha. We can work with that. Sue? Okay, Sue, give me just 1 second. Just for clarity, I switched around written communications with oral communications. We're going to go ahead and continue with oral communications. We'll pick up the written at the end.
Past time for Placerville to get serious about enforcing their management ordinance, especially with these large landowners. Before Placerville goes down in flames like Greenville just did. Colfax is Placerville on a bad day, or a day like last Tuesday if our great fire crews and CAL FIRE airdrops had not been able to catch it. That could have been a major disaster, and it was up in heavy brush that should have been taken care of by the landowners. And if we need to get serious about this and start putting the hammer down on these people to take care of their property. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mandy Rodriguez, if you don't know who I am. Is that better? Last year in November, across the street from my house, I was just sitting down to lunch, a nice lunch, and just taking a sip of my iced tea, and my neighbor calls me, and then my other neighbor calls me and says, the neighbor's house is on fire. And so I drove over here, and there's nothing as horrifying as seeing 4 fire trucks, 2 of them in your driveway, and watching your neighbor's shed burn up into flames. And I'm from Tahoe, so I had friends who lost homes in the Angora fire, and it is really awful. And probably the most awful thing, to really put it in perspective, is knowing that your pets died because you weren't home. It's an awful, awful feeling. Last week, when that fire started up, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's really close because it doesn't smell like smoke. It smells like a barbecue. Very close. And we got to do something. And I know that we have older owners, homeowners, that can't afford to do vegetation management. And I have brought this up several times. I think that the city could find a way, and the county could find a way to work with PG&E or waste management and do the work for them and tack it onto their bill, $20-$30 a month. But we have to do something. We keep talking about it. We say we're going to do grants. We're going to find, like, every day is a day that this whole town could burn up. And it's like, drop everything and let's do this and work out a way. But we have to take action now. I'm telling you, it is the saddest thing to have all your friends lose their homes. It is awful. And we're just sitting ducks waiting for it to happen here.
Thank you.
Good evening again, Kathy Lishman. I'm following up kind of on what they're saying. First, I wanted to thank the firefighters and law enforcement for the wonderful job they did putting that fire out. It burned 2.6 acres, and it actually is right, when you think about it, in the middle of town. It's an area very close to several neighborhoods. There's a senior citizen apartment across the way. One of our council members lives over there. There are the senior centers there. The older adult services is there. The psychiatric health department is there. The senior daycare is there. And the county's health department is right there. And it's in the middle of town, right across the street from downtown, right across Highway 50. On August 5th, the police department put this on their Facebook. The Placerville Police Department works diligently to enforce our city ordinances concerning open fires. We have a zero tolerance for this activity during high fire dangers, and we will take action up to making arrests if it is warranted. I know there's often talk about the homeless population when it relates to open fires. Your Placerville police officers are inspecting known encampments daily to not only enforce our ordinances, but to educate those who occupy the camps as well. And I think that's a very good step to do. As you know, there have been several fires on Quartz Mountain in the last year or so. And I don't want the city to throw up their hands and say that they can't do anything because it's private property. It is private property, and it is in foreclosure or something like that, but there has to be something the city can do. And I'm not sure why people are allowed to trespass on private property. So in that area, with those fires, I say enough is enough. And who knows what could happen next. And what would happen if it's a windy day? Thank you. 2.6 acres doesn't sound like much, but when you think about where it was, and everybody's lots are a lot smaller than that, it's pretty scary.
Thank you, Kathy.
Good evening, Council. Jonathan Gainsborough. I'm going to be speaking later to the wonderful prospect that the 2x2 came to agreement on. I wanted to touch on a couple issues. I have a packet for all of the council of my talk later, but I'll be reading it fast. Just I want to give a second coat on this, that I'm going to be saying it's wonderful for the sheriff to be leading the charge to create a managed emergency homeless campground or life change center, even on the way to a permanent brick and mortar navigation center. But what I want to repeat so that you can catch this is that first we need an experienced executive director, but then what I want you to catch is that we need the executive director has to have experience with law enforcement and homeless housing and dealing with the homeless. But we need a council of 7, and I just wanted to repeat this. We need a council made up of representatives from the city, from the county, from law enforcement, and perhaps both city and county. We need a representative from affordable housing advocates. We need a representative from the homeless themselves. We need homeless advocates have a representative, and we need an area pastor. It may be a council of 7, of 8, or 10. But the sheriff can, we'll talk later about this. One other thing is how we name it. And we could call it the Homeless Probation Center, or we could call it something positive, like a Hope Center, like a Life Center, like a Restoration Center, like a Turnaround Center, or something better that you could think of. But part of the meal to attract people is how it's presented. And the name is really going to be important. And welcome to the new city attorney. And praise the Lord that we're cognizant of Martin Boise, but we're more cognizant of the infinite value of everyone in this room and every one of our homeless. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. All right, any further for public comment? All right, seeing none, I'm going to close public comment and bring it back to the council. I think that I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that all the comments regarding the fire are duly noted, and that we, it really comes down to funding, and I know that every one of our departments has looked and continues to keep their eye on the alert for any grant funding that's available. I know that the Fire Safe Council is doing the same. I do know that there is work going on around the city, and I can't remember the gentleman's name, and I talked to him the other day, that's doing up on the other side of the, do you know what I'm talking about? On the other side of, over on the other side of the airport, and along that whole hillside there. And there's a grant, it's about $2 million grant, I think, and they're.
Is that county?
It's a mix.
I think it's
Anyway, but it's to protect that side coming this way. And I will get more on that at another point. Anyway, I do know that we are working hard on that. Anything else? Any comments? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on. All right, so. Ready? Thank you. We're going to move on to written communication.
I believe all that we have tonight, Mayor, unfortunately, our city clerk was unable to attend, but we had one written comment that came in regarding item 12.3 on your agenda from Nicole Gottberg. So.
All right, thank you. All right, that's it for written communication. We're going to go ahead and we moved item 12.3 to 12.1, and with that, I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Morris.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As has been mentioned, there was a 2-by-2 city council, 2 city council members, 2 board of supervisors. Our staff, myself and Chief Wren attended, along with county representatives, including the sheriff who is with us here tonight, last Friday. This has moved fairly quickly, and this was in response to a letter that we sent to the county. The letter requesting that they look at some sort of encampment to help us resolve the homeless problems that we have. And actually, the letter requested that they look at a minimum of 3 encampments, as you requested. And so this discussion came up, and as Sheriff DeAugustini will tell you, we were going roundabout and maybe not really making a lot of progress. And I'll give him credit that he came up with this idea. Not he came up with, he was presented an idea that someone had presented to him. And so I'm going to turn it over to Sheriff DeAugustini at this point, let him go through that. Myself and Chief Wren can answer any questions if you would like. I was at the meeting with the Board of Supervisors today. They approved this in concept and requested that it come back, I believe, on August 31st to them with more detailed costs and et cetera of what it would take to complete this. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Sheriff.
All right, can you all hear me?
We can, Sheriff, and thank you very much for attending our meeting tonight under these circumstances.
And no problem. I apologize for not being there in person, but I come down with a dry cough and I don't know which way it's going, so I didn't want to be there in person. Also, I don't hear very well, so the speaker on my computer here, but I'm sure City Council folks that were there, and Cleve, City Manager Morris, and Chief Wren can also stand up with me and answer questions if there are any at the end. So I'll start off with, as City Manager Morris stated, the meeting.
We just lost your audio, Sheriff. Hang on a second there. You might have muted yourself.
How's that?
There we go. We got you.
My 3x5s, I hit the wrong button. So it was a 2x2 with the county and the city to come up with some ideas. And everybody's been having these conversations for years now, and I understand that. And then to exacerbate the whole problem, we had the issue with the Boise case that really hampered our ability to do anything with the homeless, as far as from and I'll use the word the blight side of it. I know Jonathan's in the audience, and I'll have comments for Jonathan here in a minute, and I appreciate his zeal and his passion for this issue. But I'll back up a few weeks ago, and I had a lady come into my office. Her name was Liz Drummond, and she told me a story that she'd been dealing with this and dealing with the homeless, and it's been an issue of hers for years. And she had a plan, and she laid it out before myself and some of my staff that included the HOT team. And after looking at some of, getting past some of the legal issues and misconceptions, but some of it actually had some merit. And her plan was called HOSTES, Homeless One-Stop Temporary Emergency Social Services. What it consists of is basically a tent city, so to speak, but controlled, with services and programs and everything available. Some use the word transition or navigation, something similar to that, something similar to the San Antonio model. This is not to replace the turnkey project or all the other projects that are going on, but it is some place to have for the homeless to be at. Right now, when they're out in the public areas, per the Boise case, if we don't have some place to go, we can't move them. This will be some place for them to go, and we will move them. For private property, if the private property owner does not want them there, then we have this place for them to go. For the vast majority of them, it will work. It'll be a place where we can focus those services, we can focus those programs, we can do everything for them that we possibly can. For those that don't want to partake in the program, well, I've talked with the courts, I've talked with our district attorney's office, talked with the probation office, and there will be a route for them as well. The courts would entertain a homeless court, so to speak, where we could get some court-ordered mental health treatment and drug and alcohol treatment and so forth and so on. The question has always been, where would you put something like this? And of course, the NIMBY effect comes up. Nobody wants it in their backyard. Nobody. And I understand that. But the county owns a piece of property inside the city limits that I think would fit that model perfectly, and that is right next to our jail. On the west side of our jail, there's a large parking area that we could do this at. Now, for it to work, we're proposing that it is under the direction of the sheriff's office. And I say that because I want it to work. And God bless Jonathan, but if we put it under a council of 7, It's going to be the same roundabout talk, and nothing's going to happen. Now, having said that, we're going to run it. We're going to administer it, but we are going to need everybody's help. We're going to need help from the nonprofits. We're going to need help from Health and Human Services. Everybody has to be committed to this, and everybody has to have skin in the game for it to work. And I think, from what I've been hearing, that for the most part we're getting that support. Some of the questions that were asked were, cost. Obviously, cost is going to be a huge issue. I am hoping that with all the nonprofits and all of the folks in the community that always want to step up and help with the homeless issue, that we can do a lot of this very cheaply. We're not talking about a nice place. We're not talking about bringing in mobile apartments or mobile housing. We're talking about a tent city. We're talking about security. It will be fenced, where the folks inside can be secure and feel safe and feel separated from each other, so that if they don't like this person that's homeless over here, they don't have to be around that person. They'll have bathrooms, they'll have laundry facilities, they'll have shower facilities, they'll have classrooms, they'll have places to get their treatment, everything provided for them to help them get out of homeless. It is not to be designed to be a permanent thing. The whole intent is for it to be temporary until we can work through this issue and get, through turnkey and through everything else, as many of these folks help as possible. So the board was really wanted a cost. If we had to pay for everything and we were in that much of a hurry to do it tomorrow, and we had to bring in contractors and buy everything, the ugly number that they came up with was $1.8 million. And who came up with that? My staff in 2 days. So that's a very, very rough number. But like I said, I'm hoping that we can do this for just a few $100,000 through ARPA or through whatever, because all of the services are here already. We just need to get them in one place for these folks to be able to get the services that they need. Lastly, I'll add that, I'm sure there will be issues moving through this, civil, legal questions. We may make some mistakes, but I think that's okay. I think we're doing something and we're moving in the right direction. And tonight we're just looking for the buy-in from the city to move forward, because everybody's got to work together. And then as we move forward and costs start looking like we're going to get some costs involved, and when we can start discussing those and where that money will come from. But that's the program. We got the place. We got the people. I think we need to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sheriff. I really appreciate you, taking a leadership role on this and moving this idea forward. And I express my appreciation to Ms. Hammond as well for stepping up and sharing her information. Ms. Drummond, sharing her information and also helping move this idea forward. With that, I'm going to bring it to the council for any clarifying questions right now, and if not, I'll open it up to public comment. Sure.
Just one question, and it could be for the sheriff or, I don't know, staff might know, but do we know the size of how many folks we anticipate for a location like this? Yeah, the capacity.
I'm sorry, was that question for me?
Or whoever, whoever might have the answer on that one.
Maybe I can jump in, Sheriff. Today you mentioned the number that you think, it was 90-some people, do you think are the numbers between Placerville and the county? Could you review those for me?
Yeah, I missed that part. I apologize. So the county uses their homeless pit count, the point-in-time count, and it rolls from somewhere around 600. That's not the number that we're using. Our hot team deals with the folks that I believe the community understands when they hear homeless, and those are the ones that in the dirt homeless, we call them. We don't count couch surfers. We don't count the 18-year-olds that are moved out of mom and dad's house, don't have a place to live, but they're hanging out with friends. We don't count the person that's passing through that's living in their motorhome, staying a couple nights at Walmart. we deal with, we're talking about in the dirt homeless, the ones that are living up there by Upper Broadway, the ones that are living behind Target, the ones that are down in Cameron Park. So of that number, we have our homeless team keeps a very accurate inventory. It is, as of Monday morning, yesterday morning, it was 93. And that consisted of 31 in the county and 62 in the city limits of Placerville.
And following up on that, if I could, Sheriff, I think the question was, is the capacity large enough of this area you're talking about if we had, say, 90 people? I don't know that we'll get that many, but could it handle that many people?
Yes.
So is Ms. Hammond sent out the 40-page document, Drummond, just before we, started our council meeting a couple hours before. We didn't have a chance to review it, but are we looking at a full, it sounded like between the classrooms and the place for meeting with the individuals and having and helping them move through a process that would get them out of homeless? Is that part of this goal of this project?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you very much. Yes, Patty, speak loud.
I've been going through the posed questions that Ms. Drummond put in her report, and one of them that particularly caught my eye was the folks that want to continue alcohol, drugs, etc., can continue, but they have to leave the camp to do it. So as you're well aware, and a lot of people, I own property on Placerville Drive just down from where all this is going to take place. So my question is, you say they have to go 1,000 feet away. So does that mean that they're going to be able to come down to not only my property, but there's a lot of commercial property down there on Placerville Drive, to do their drugs, alcohol, etc., to buy their products, and naturally they would do them, partake down there, and turn that area into something that I don't want to see happen?
So that's a great question. So I want to make it clear that the whole hostess program laid out in Liz Drummond's plan is again, she presented that whole program to us, looking at the legal issues, looking at some of the constitutional issues and getting rid of those, and looking at other issues in there. We're using it as a concept. Now, as it pertains to those types of situations, so folks that are homeless, they still have constitutional rights, and they're not in jail even if they're at the shelter or at this hostess camp, so to speak. We can't make them stay there. However, we can tell them that they can't be anywhere else. So now that we have a place for them, per the Boise case, they can't be living on public property. And they obviously can't be living on private property as long as the private property owner doesn't want them there. Now, if they want to leave and they want to go downtown or come down Placerville Drive or somewhere and buy their booze or meet their drug dealer, they can do that. But they can't break the law. If they are drunk in public, we will take care of it that way. If they are dealing drugs or buying drugs, we'll be dealing with it that way. We're going to be counting on all of the residents and all of the businesses in there to help us as well, by calling us and letting us know, working with our office in the unincorporated areas in the city of Placerville, with the police department in the incorporated areas. The same with that residential area up in the back behind the jail. We're going to be canvassing that area and having them sign trespassing agent letters where we become their agent for trespassing cases. And if any of these individuals wander off and are on their property, then we don't just cite them, we take them to jail. And that's where I said, when I said I've been working with the district attorney and talking to the courts, because there will be a zero tolerance total enforcement aspect of it. We want to help these people, and we want to get them all the programs that we can to help them. But we're not going to tolerate the homelessness in public anymore. They'll have a place. They will be provided every opportunity. We're going to get everything there that we can to provide every opportunity that we can. And if they don't want to be homeless in El Dorado County anymore, then they can go be homeless somewhere else.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. I'm going to go ahead. Any other?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, okay, go ahead.
I have a couple questions.
Speak up.
You know, referring back to when we opened Hangtown Haven, we had people coming from all over the state, in-state, out-of-state, to Placerville. How are you going to mitigate that kind of issue when the word gets out that Placerville has a legal camp, everybody can come, and how are you going to deal with that?
Because it's not going to be a fun place to be. It's going to be there to get your services, to get you out of homelessness. And we are going to cater to our own homeless here in El Dorado County. That was one of the things about Hangtown Haven was it was open, and you're right, the word got out, and you know, I got quoted many times this morning at the Board of Supervisors meeting saying that we don't want a bird feeder, that you put out a bird feeder, the birds show up and they crap all over the place, and that's exactly right. And we're not going to set up that kind of a program. One of the best, the most success rate that our HOT team has had is with homeless in our county that are from out of our county. They have been very successful in finding family, friends, working with the VA, working with other social services to find them warm handoffs, meaning places that they can go and live and not be homeless in their county or their city of origin. So it's not going to be people aren't going to be coming, we're not going to make it a place for people to come from Sacramento or Seattle or Portland or anywhere else because it's going to be a great thing. It's not going to be a great thing. It's going to be a place for our locals to get the services they need to get out of homelessness.
Okay, then I'm worried, Michael kind of touched on the capacity of the camp, and I didn't get a total number of how many people it can take, but my question is, what happens when we exceed that capacity?
Well, the goal is to drop that capacity. So right now, with the total count that our homeless team has in inventory is 93. Of that 93, I expect that probably 75 or 80 will end up in this camp. The rest of them will go somewhere else because they don't want to play. We will have the capacity for probably around 100. When it gets more than that, I don't see there being much more than that. I don't see being much more than what we start off with because we'll have a captive audience to be able to get the programs to be able to work with the homeless court through those that don't want to play ball and reduce that number significantly. That is the ultimate goal, is to reduce it, get rid of it.
Okay, and then my last question for now is, are you guys considering any agreements with the upper room? When the upper room will feed anybody who comes to town, we have a problem. And that was part of the problem with the upper room. Or the,
so one of the things we want to do is we want to get to the upper room. We want to sit down and have a conversation with them instead of them serving meals there, other than to the needy families, which was their original goal, vision and mission. But other than that, no more homeless meals there. They will hopefully deliver meals to this new camp.
That's all I have for now.
Thank you, Jackie. All right. With that, I'm going to go ahead, seeing no other questions right now, I'm going to go ahead and open this up for public comment.
Since we were mentioned, I'll step up first. Hi, I'm Charlie McDonald. I'm the Executive Director of the Upper Room and a resident of Placerville. This hit us all of a sudden. I think it hit all of us without expectation. I have spent the last hour and a half reading the proposal, and I'm really impressed with it. I'm looking forward to looking at it closer. But I want to thank the sheriff for stepping up and making this happen. I think we've been struggling for years, organizations, to come up with some kind of a program and some kind of a solution to the homeless. And it's been a lot of talk, but no action. And I'm glad to see somebody step up and actually put some action to words and get something going. We're supportive of this. We want to see where this goes. We'd like to be a part of it. And I wanted to kind of redo what I did this morning at the Board of Supervisors, and just talk about a small portion of the homeless community that we don't think about, especially the business owners up on Upper Broadway and the residents in the area. When they see homeless, they think drug addict and alcoholic, and they see them on their steps and around the front of their businesses, and that's certainly an aspect of it. But that's usually a result of something and not the initial problem. And the HOT team has done a great job lowering the homeless in our area. The police department has done. Project Room Key has helped take some of them off the streets. And the other aspect is, whether you approve it or not, the COVID unemployment, the money the homeless have been collecting for the last 18 months. The higher functioning homeless have bought RVs and motorhomes, minivans, and rented rooms and found places to live that are off the street. Now, when that money runs out, when the cars break down, they'll probably return to that. But for right now, a lot of the higher functioning homeless are not homeless right now. That leaves the 50-some on Upper Broadway, up on the hill up near us, as a lower functioning homeless. Those are the people that are having the biggest problem functioning in life. They have moderate to zero mental health issues as a primary reason, and not so much the drug addiction or drug use, although that's prevalent. I won't just discount that. In almost every case, they're victims of severe trauma that goes back from childhood, sexual abuse, abandonment, verbal, emotional, all the abuse from parents and growing up. They grew up in dysfunctional or broken families, did not have role models many from infancy on how to be a person, how to be a human, how to be an adult, how to be a functioning adult, how to have relationships, because the only relationships they've seen are abusive. So they grow up with that and they model that. They can't model normal behavior, and that's what we expect them. Well, just be normal, get off the drugs and act normal. They can't do that because they don't know what normal is. And I don't excuse their behavior. I just ask that you consider that they've dealt with severe trauma. They don't want, like I said, they don't know what normal is. They don't live with hope. Every adult figure or authoritative figure in their life has probably betrayed them or hurt them. They have never had a healthy relationship. They've never known somebody that they're safe in a parent or in a friend or in a relationship. We ask them to trust us, and they've never trusted anybody because everybody they put their trust in has hurt or harmed them, and after a while, they're done. And so they live without hope. They exist, they survive from day to day, and we want to help them. We should help them. But it's just not a switch, and just relocating them to a camp is not going to work. It's critical that we provide the services, the mental health services, the navigation services, and most importantly, be able to build relationships with them to where they can let down the walls and find hope to make those decisions to raise themselves out of where they're at. So thank you for your time. I'm so happy that we've got something going here, and I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. Just for the record, I gave you a little bit, a minute or more better time, and the reason I did that is because he is actually a cooperator, a participant in the homeless programs that we're doing in the community, and he's going to be a partner in this program, we hope, and we anticipate. And so I wanted to make sure that you were able to at least advocate for what you're doing and where you're at. And so I appreciate what you do for our community to begin with, and thank you very much there, Charlie. So let's go ahead.
Thank you. Appreciate your support.
You bet. And we're still going to stick to the 3-minute number here, but please go.
I timed it at home, so I hope it works.
All right, thank you.
Hello.
If you could pull the mic down a little bit more, there you go.
Is that
Thank you.
better?
Perfect.
I'm Peg Vanderkar from Placerville. I've been here over 41 years. I've been involved in homeless services issues for over that time, even before we came here from Contra Costa County. El Dorado County has lacked a 24/7 place for folks experiencing homelessness to get centered, safely store their belongings, get cleaned up, be able to go to appointments or jobs or other events away from their camp. They lacked sanitary and garbage facilities. They've often been traumatized by life events, as Charlie so poignantly pointed out in detail, have mental illness or addiction diagnoses, and feel threatened and powerless. Women are in fear for their safety constantly. Many of our homeless here grew up here, went to school here, graduated here if they graduated. Keep that in mind. That's something I learned with years of nomadic shelter work. A managed campground near the jail on property being offered by the sheriff is a good first step. It is something rather than years of nothing. The sheriff is asking for full community participation also. Of course, the details will be important. When costs are assessed, I encourage comparison of the financial costs of doing this to the costs of not doing this. Research has shown that whether voluntary or involuntary entry to a managed campground or other facility, success and progress depends on what's offered. If there's nothing but a campground, they will not be able to deal with the issues that have maintained their homelessness. We know from research, too, that the best success rate, of course, comes to those who have experienced homelessness in the shortest time, for the shortest time. That's logical. Mental illness and addiction help is a key issue with chronically homeless. My opinion, and lastly, I just wanted to say my opinion due to my close proximity of this topic, because Hangtown Haven was so widely advertised, it drew unwelcome people from outside the county. The Haven's internal workings always were for local Placerville residents who stayed sober so as to remain in the Haven and who worked on progress toward health and a future. There were always outside volunteers supervising, though the camp formed a community with leaders who were sober and responsible. Many of our local homeless people there have grown up here. In closing, having a managed campground next to the jail under the purview of the sheriff, I believe is likely to largely prevent the outsider problem. We may want to work on this new program quietly, but with the collaboration with the whole community to make it work. Thank you. I have mine on paper if anybody wants it.
Perfect. Thank you, Peg. All right. Hello, Jonathan.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Jonathan Gainsborough. If you give me an extra 20 seconds, I just returned from the largest small house community in America called Community First Village. If you would write that name down and look on YouTube at their 10-minute, it's a 2020 video tour. They're expanding to 1,400 individual dwellings. They've solved questions that we haven't even asked, problems that we haven't run into. For example, when I sat for an hour with the founder of it, Alan Graham, on his porch at his home, and he told me, he said, I said, how do you keep people from out of the area? He said, well, they have to at least have been homeless in the Austin area for 1 year. That will work here with this campground. I need to get to my written speech, but that's just a little bit of millions of ideas that he has. I'm going to send a copy of his book and buy it for all of you and for all the supervisors. His book is called Welcome Home Less, with a line through the less. The sheriff has heard what I've already said, but I want to repeat it. What percentage of the homeless would utilize a navigation center. Charlie McDonald several weeks ago said 20% at his first response to the council. Then he revised upwards to 50 or 60%, depending on who is in charge and how it is managed. Here's the question. Should the proposed navigation center be run by the county sheriff or started by him and run by a council of 7 or 10 community representatives? 2 years ago at a local town hall on homelessness, our sheriff spoke disparagingly about the homeless as a blight. I won't go into the specifics, but I have the Mountain Democrat article for you, as will be passed out by Jane. Hopefully God has changed his heart and all of ours as we gain more compassion and become more human by humanizing others. No human being is more or less valuable than any other. God gives different callings and gifts to different people. Law enforcement does certain things very well, but healing emotionally broken people, scarred, wounded, often mentally ill, homeless, is not their expertise or direct calling. So then who should be in charge? What we need is an experienced executive director. Secondly, we need a council of 7 or perhaps 10. These will be enumerated in your packet. A council representing city, from county, from law enforcement, from housing advocates, from the homeless themselves, from homeless advocates, and also an area pastor. And you can embroider or improve on that. We realize we're 15 or 20 years behind on this homelessness issue. These words came from the daring and honest and humble dais of the city of Placerville several weeks ago. The county realizes it's also 15 to 20 years behind. Tahoe Coalition scored 3 motels for its 100 homeless, but the Western Slope has 5 times that number, 500 homeless, and yet not one permanent shelter. Our transition or turnaround center must succeed, or we all fail as a community. God's word says there's a time to every purpose under heaven. Why rush off into a rash, ready, fire, aim decision? Have we heard from the stakeholders, from the homeless and from homeless advocates? We dare not say the surgery was a success, but the patients, plural, died. What kind of a navigation director is needed? We need one who has worked with the homeless for years and also with life change centers alongside the police, government, county, and city entities. I believe Julia Hackett is a perfect starting point. Have you ever been to an unsympathetic dentist? Many of us have, and we suffer lifetime dental phobia. Similarly, the homeless suffer long-term, they suffer law enforcement phobia. In closing, we must not set a banquet for those starving to death, for whom no one is willing or too afraid because of their mental illness and lifestyle trauma, too afraid to come to that banquet. God bless you all.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Okay, I'm a little person. How's that?
Please speak up in the microphone so the sheriff can hear you
Absolutely.
Thank
My
you.
name is Jane McGinnis, and I want to, first of all, thank the sheriff very much. He was extremely gracious this morning while I kind of made some comments. I thank you, Sheriff. I feel it is extremely important that we recognize, whether we're calling it a campground or a life center or a transition center, that it can't be something that finally we have something and a year later we don't. And now we're waiting again for 2 or 3 years for the strategic plan to somehow bloom. Whatever it is we can put in place needs to continue and morph into something bigger and better until we've arrived where we want to go. So I agree that probably the sheriff needs to be in charge of it at the beginning because there's no other way to get it done. There's been nobody else who has been able to come forward with something that they feel will work in an area that, frankly, I approve of. I think next door to the jail is a very good idea because if you're working with the homeless, you're working with the probation department in many cases. Law enforcement needs to be one of the services that the executive director, that the executive board can draw upon, along with job training, with self-esteem restoration, with addiction issues. So what is the difference? Why is it such a big deal? If we have a homeless population that does, and in truth, they do, many of them have a law enforcement phobia or a lack of trust, may not be because of anything that's actually happened to them. It may be because of their life experience on the streets. But if we set up a camp run by the sheriff's department next door to the jail, what message are we sending? Are we really setting up something that is doomed to failure unless we sweep people into it, whether they want to go into it or not? Here's my point. If you're going to do life counseling, addiction counseling, self-esteem issues, job training, transition, who are the people who do that, healing and lifting up broken people? They tend to be flexible and patient and optimistic, forgiving, because their people are constantly slipping, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, inspirational, and they have a shared reality of brokenness. This is why we need an executive director who is experienced in working with the homeless. What is the best thing about law enforcement? They are into community service. They are protective of our societal norms. We rely on them to be firm, to be self-certain, to expect compliance. Those who work healing the broken are working in messiness, and they're seeking improvement. Those in law enforcement are also working in messiness. They're trying to seek order. Those of you who know me know I'm constantly alert for civic liability. I don't want us to stumble into the quicksand. All I'm saying is a cynic looking at this idea without bringing in other services by having law enforcement directly supervising could say, especially if it was a civil rights attorney who made a lot of money in this field, that's very interesting. They set it up to fail. The true intent was not service, but failure in order to force the homeless out. I see potential liability here seeking to evade Martin Boise rather than to satisfy it. So I'm saying, gather us all together. Let the sheriff start it, but bring us all together. Let's all do it together.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mandy Rodriguez again. First, I'd like to thank you, Sheriff DeAugustini, for taking this on, because there's no right answer. Nobody has a right answer for this, right? Last week, I went up and I talked to the homeless at the camp up there on Newtown Road for about an hour. And I plan on going back. I don't know if any of you have ever walked up to that homeless camp. I've done it a couple times now. And I think it's important that you do. You need to put your eyes there. It is really awful. It's a sad place to be. I think that it's great that we're doing this. But, you know, axe murderers, when they go to jail, they get water. They also get bathrooms. And I understand the bird feeder analogy, but there's no reason until we get this homeless camp or center situated that we can't provide them with hand washing stations and porta potties. I mean, it's just, I can't get around it. And I think you guys know that it's just something where I agree with Mr. Gainsborough on that. We have to. Also, we have to remember that these women are broken and they don't have trust. And we need to make space for their animal. A lot of them, most of them have dogs. That's very important. They will not leave their camp unless they can bring their dogs. And I think it's very important for them to have that support. If you take them up to the Best Western, there's drugs up there. You're going to just put them around drugs. I don't think that that's an answer at all. I think it's a waste of money. Save your money for this navigation site. And we have to also remember a lot of these local people, or these homeless, they did grow up here. And some of them come from wealthy families, well-known families in this area. It's kind of crazy. So, yeah, it's sad. And whatever you guys do, I think it needs to be something that inspires the homeless to participate. When they see people like them having success, they will be inspired. We also need to give them responsibilities. Let them cook. Let them clean. Let them take care of their space. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Kirk Smith. I just had some questions because we all agree that this is a problem that needs to be addressed, and we're really thrilled that some action's being done, but there are just some things that puzzle me. For example, for at least a year or two, there was discussion about doing exactly the same thing over near the fairgrounds. There were some facilities that are already there. And there was this kind of comprehensive approach described a moment ago of various kinds of resources that would be made available. Perfect place for it. And yes, Councilmember Burley is right. It does bring up the not in my backyard, and my family has property there too. But I spoke in favor of it because it was a smart project. And then all of a sudden, we hear about something being proposed not far away by the jail, which also happens to be where the proposed courthouse is. And what do you know, just a couple weeks ago, there was discussion at the Board of Supervisors about, well, you know, we're not going to build, the state doesn't want to build right now, this proposed courthouse, but Great Oak Construction is interested in helping out with building some roads out there leading up to that area. And then some controversy comes up, at least a lot of discussion, because, well, we got a lot of potholes all over the place in the city and outside, and then we're going to spend money on building a road, you know, for that driveway to that facility. So I'm just telling you, it just, some parts of this puzzle just don't fit. Why? Why all of a sudden? And these 2x2 committees always concern me because we've seen one deal after another come out of them, which lead to a lot of controversy. The renting of the business about the mustard and ketchup, conceived in 2x2. We find out later. A whole series of things. And of course, 2x2 is done because under the Brown Act, you don't have to give notice, you don't have to have agendas, you don't have to have minutes. Nobody knows what happened there except what gets packaged and sent out afterwards. I'm just telling you that it doesn't quite make sense that you have done this kind of work in the past regarding the property near the fairgrounds, which has some structures on it already, and it's open, not heavily forested as it'd be over by the jail, which brings up another fire issue that we've seen happen before. Anyway, I hope it disturbs, even though we want to do something right away, I hope you'll spend enough time to let us learn more than what's been presented tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirk.
Good evening. I'm Don Vanderkar. Excuse me. About, over 10 years ago, I was sleeping on the floor of the Seventh-day Adventist Church up in Camino with homeless people. Since then, I've been involved with the Hangtown Haven as a volunteer there. Is that better? I also was quite involved with the nomadic shelter. I deeply care about this issue for personal reasons, but I am very much concerned about a facility being proposed and operated, I guess, under the auspices of the sheriff. The people who I know who are homeless need love, compassion. They also need a lot of structure. They also need a lot of help, a lot of mentoring. I understand that, but I'm concerned that we do need to work on this issue. However, I am absolutely delighted that the sheriff has come through with something definitive. We have been involved working this program or this project for so long. It's really time for us to, I think, converge and do something. These people on the street are suffering. They die. I have attended many memorial services over the last several decades. Please, let's do something. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. All right. Do we have anybody else that would like to make public comment? Looks like we have one. Yeah.
Sue Rodman, resident of Placerville. I've been concerned about the homeless issue for quite some years. And I think that I remember a city council meeting not too long ago where we were talking about a managed camp. Looked like maybe that was the best option. And I think with the improvements that the sheriff has outlined here of having services available for people, facilities to let them wash their clothes and their bodies and take care of themselves, I think is a huge improvement over the current totally unmanaged system that we have now. It should improve the safety for women, for everyone, not only for the homeless, but also for city residents. And I hope that you will do something about defensible space up there so that you don't have a fire problem. I think it's certainly an improvement. I'm in favor of it. I'd like to see it go. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue.
Good evening again, Kathy Lishman. I think it is a huge step in the right direction. I see this as having more potential than anything else that has been proposed so far. And I'd like to thank Liz Drummond, and I look forward to reading her document, and Sheriff DeAgostini. I'm interested in what our city attorney has to say about it. But I think it has so much potential, and there's details to be worked out still, but I think it could be a win-win for the homeless and a win-win for the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
Hello, my name is Julia Hackett, and since my name was mentioned, I thought I better come up here and say something. I want to thank Sheriff DeAgostini for a bold and courageous move to come forward on this. It's a problem that is not simple, and there's not a one-size-fits-all for our homeless nor for the community. And I just want people to keep that in mind when they start looking. There's a huge stigma involved and labels involved, not only for the homeless, but for those in the community that view the homeless and also view our law enforcement and social services and access to behavioral health services. It goes on and on. I've been a member and a resident of the county for 31 years. My husband's retired law enforcement from El Dorado Sheriff's Office, and I once worked for the Sheriff's Office, so at the jail. So anyway, I want you to not look at this just as a one-size-fits-all, but also when action needs to be taken, because it is lives and it's costly. Not only if the county takes this on and the city takes this on, but it's also costly for human capital too. So anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Julia. All right, seeing no other people coming up, we're going to go ahead and close public comment at this time. And I would like to say one thing to start off the conversation here is that I have a good friend of mine that has a business, and he's kind of a business coach kind of a guy. And one of his monikers that he tells and he preaches on is, especially in business, when you're setting up new programs and setting up new new processes in your business is the first time sucks. And it sucks every time. And it's difficult and it's challenging, and you learn from it, and you build on it, and you do that. And I don't think this is going to be any different. I think it's going to be challenging. This is a multi-dimensional process, and all the comments that everybody made, they're all right. And everything that people said that we need, all those needs are there. All the challenges that people talked about, every single one of them are there. And are we going to address every one of them? I don't know that we're going to hit every button and we're going to check off every box on that list. And yet, like also many people said, we have to do something. And like some people said, we really appreciate the sheriff stepping up and doing this. I know that we have discussed many properties around the area, and we have begged the county to tell us what 6 properties they have, but they have yet to disclose, and that's okay, because they have their reasons, and I understand that. We have struggled to find a location that's not in somebody's backyard, and it's real. And we were moving in some directions, and one of the reasons we went in that 2x2 is because we wanted to have an honest heart-to-heart conversation with the county about where we're at and where we're going and how we can move this ball down the field. And, the sheriff did not come into this meeting letting everybody know what he was going to do, but we left with a tangible idea to move forward. And I tell you what, it was a good meeting. It was a meeting that had to happen. And it's a meeting that wouldn't happen in a situation like this. They just don't happen at council meetings. They don't happen at supervisor meetings. They just don't. So what I would like to do is kind of allow some more questions or comments or discussion among our council here. And our ultimate goal is to provide some guidance and direction for our staff and give the sheriff some indication of where we're at with this. So I think that's where our discussion needs to lead.
I'll take a swing here and start off. Again, thank you, Sheriff, for stepping up on this issue. I think it took the sheriff in order to get us to this spot where we are today, because there was a lot of just sort of going around. I think the big difference too going forward was that from previous times and from previous years is there's actually some dollars that can go with this. There was never dollars before. The stimulus dollars, ARPA funds, all of those things are really what's making this happen, because those just didn't exist before. So it was like, am I going to cut police officers? Am I going to cut, transportation dollars? Terry's cutting it. Because that's what essentially what we would have had to do. I mean, we'd have to take general fund dollars and cut those in order to do some other type of homeless services from the city and for the county, quite frankly, as well, because there's a finite amount of money. And so this is why we have an opportunity today in order to do something. So I just want to kind of level set that, because I think that's why we're talking here today. Otherwise, we'd be still Band-Aiding little and a little bit. And it's still a Band-Aid. I mean, because quite frankly, like I've said many times, billions of dollars have been spent throughout this state, and the situation's only gotten worse. And so I don't pretend to this be the panacea to everything. I think Charlie's been really honest about the amount of people that are going to be successful and those that just don't want the help. But I think this gives us some pathways. Sheriff, I'm really interested in the homeless court. I think that's something that, those were levers that law enforcement had before when we had sort of the drug diversion programs that unfortunately with Prop 47 and some other propositions kind of went away. And so this gives us an opportunity potentially to kind of go down that path. And as I've said in other conversations is, I think we have an opportunity. I think the state has seen the pendulum swing one way. I think there might be some sanity coming back in another direction so that we can give both law enforcement as well as those that provide services to the homeless the tools that they need to be able to actually do what they need to do. And I'll be a broken record, but we need 2 to 3 statewide mental health facilities that can actually go in, because you're not going to solve the problem by somebody here in the community providing 2-3 hours of mental health services a week. I mean, this is a 24/7 process, and for folks that are so far gone, and I was at my office yesterday in Sacramento. I had a guy throwing shoes at our door at my office, talking to himself. I went out to walk one of my staff members back to her car, and it was sort of surreal because it's just, with no workers there, it's just, there's just homeless people along K Street. And so, and those folks, those poor folks are not going to just be helped by an outpatient service. So you want to call it involuntary, whatever you want to call it, those are still going to have to be part of that, of that discussion as we go forward. And again, that's a statewide California issue. But for here, I think this is a great step forward. We didn't see this even a few days ago. This was great to see this kind of come forward. I'm really hopeful about this. Like I said, I don't think we're going to boil the ocean here, but it's going to be a step in the right direction. Only question I have really at this point, because I think some of these other things will work itself out, to Councilmember Borelli's question about, are we going to move some bad behavior to other parts of the city, and just that Sheriff D'Agostini and Chief Wren, that there would be a plan in place from a EDSO and from a PPD, that we would have the right staffing and know that if we do see bad behavior, that we're on that sort of quickly. But other than that, I think a lot of these things are going to work out as they go forward. And as the mayor said, we're going to make mistakes because this is a brand new process. But but you have to make those mistakes, I think, in order to get to where we need to go. So those are my comments for now.
All right, Jackie?
First I want to make a comment on the bathrooms. This has been an ongoing question from the community for probably 10 years, and part of the reason the bathrooms aren't there is because they are consistently getting destroyed. Destroyed in the city of Placerville, destroyed along the trail. They won't even put the bathrooms out on the trail in places because that's what keeps happening. It's not that we don't want to provide bathrooms. It's that the companies won't even provide them anymore. Because they're tired of replacing them, and it's very costly. So I wanted to point out that reality. So this proposal brings all the problems back to the city of Placerville. I want to be supportive of a program moving forward, but I think we also need to think about all of our residents in this city. I did have a chance to skim over the thing from Liz Drummond, and I think when I was doing some of her math, she's proposing 480 people to be able to be in that camp. And I'm going to bring it back to the point that the city needs to do their part, but I would like to see a 100-person cap on what we're going to keep in the city. If we're going to move forward with this project and the sheriff is correct, it's only going to be 100 people, then what I'm asking shouldn't be a problem, where the county is going to, as this part of moving this forward, provide those other locations so that when we get to these bigger numbers, that there's going to be somewhere else, and this is not just going to be the city of Placerville's problem. I want to see agreements with the upper room, because if they're going to keep servicing people who are in the woods, that's going to be a constant problem. We need to have an agreement with people providing services to not be providing services to people who are just putting the community in danger. I hear what you're saying on the trauma and everything of these people. You also need to think about the other 11,000 people in this city. People who've been traumatized by the homeless, couples who've had their dogs torn apart by other homeless dogs, who are afraid to go out in public places with their animals anymore. Our residents have been traumatized by the homeless also. We need to look at everybody, not just one group. That's our goal, to make everybody safe. I'd like to look at a one-year review that we say, how is this going? I know I've heard, comments against that, but, we need to seriously look how it's impacting our city and our community as a whole, and not just say we're going to go no matter what. So those are kind of my thoughts on being able to support this. Thank you.
Patty?
Okay, so I'm sorry that if I came across not in my backyard with the statement that I made, but in relation to what Jackie has just said, Placerville has paid a huge price with some of the destruction caused by the homeless. And our Broadway area is a fine example. And we've had a lot of businesses go out of business because of the element, everything that went on up there. And when I asked that question of Sheriff D'Agostini, it was in response to some of the proposals that Ms. Drummond wrote in her report to us. And like I say, what really piqued my interest was this. She put it in the form of questions that could be asked, and one of them was like a homeless person saying, well, you're telling me I can't have alcohol or drugs, et cetera, and the answer was, yes, you can have it, but you have to leave the camp to do it. So naturally, my concern is this camp is right at the top of Ray Lawyer Drive. And at the bottom of Ray Lawyer Drive is Rayleigh's and banks and businesses, my building included. And so when I hear the statement, you have to leave the camp, what does that mean? So that's why my thoughts went to, are they going to come down to Placerville Drive, and are we going to have another situation like went on at Broadway and jeopardize the businesses down there? I don't want to see that happen. Sheriff D'Agostini and what he said to me in his answer, and I have a feeling that our police chief and everybody will be on the lookout for this, and I hope that's true. I am not against trying this, and I agree with everybody that we have tried and tried and tried to present something that's going, we've just got to do something. And it kind of sounds like to me that they've got a lot of the bases covered, and I'm hoping that that's true. And I think with proper regulations, with people that are going to run this that really know what they're doing, that I think it'll work. So, but I just wanted to make that clear.
Just get one clarifying question, because I didn't understand. When I read through the proposal from Liz, I thought that they were going to be able to drink and do their drugs at the site, but they were not going to be able to obtain them in the site. Can I get a clarification whether where the addicts are going to be doing what they're doing? I'd like that answer from the sheriff, please.
You're muted there. Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah, so drugs are absolutely, they're illegal. So if they're illegal, they're illegal. If they're going to go off-site and they're going to get their drugs, better not get caught with their drugs. The drinking part, we're going to have to figure out how we're going to deal with those rules. Again, this is going to be a learning experience. If somebody wants to have a beer, there's nothing against the law against having a beer. We're going to be playing that constitutional line very close. But to get to your original comments, Jackie and Patty, you guys are already dealing with this uptown. It's going to be everywhere anyway. This is a program that has merit, that we're willing to try and willing to see if we can make it work. And I was going to save this for the closing, but I'm going to say it now. This is going to take, as I said at the beginning, this is going to take commitment and cooperation and participation from everybody. We are going to need all of the nonprofits that are always standing up hollering that they want to help the homeless. We want them there. We want them at the table. The upper room, I'm so happy to hear that. One of the biggest that we're going to have, and I hope, I don't know if he's on this call or not, but one of the biggest hurdles we're going to have is getting the services out of Health and Human Services in this county, because they're having a brain block on trying to figure out how to divert services to this. It's not a diversion. It's just instead of serving it in one place, they're going to be serving it in another place. But all these programs being available there, we have to try it. We have a place for it. Let's give it a shot.
Thank you, Sheriff.
All right, I've got a couple comments. First, Sheriff D'Agostini, I want to express my gratitude to you for being willing to step up in this way and bring this idea forward. I also, want to extend my thanks to Ms. Drummond for her proposal. It came in right before the meeting, so I've skimmed parts of it. I haven't looked over the entire thing at this point, but clearly a lot of hard work and thought has gone into it. And I think it's a really good, from a conceptual standpoint, I think it's a really good start. I have been, and I also want to thank the public who's here tonight for all of their thoughtful comments too. It's been a really good discussion on this. I have been really, really concerned about fire danger, the hazardous waste and blight that is caused from these encampments, and also about getting the services to those in need. And this proposal checks all of those boxes. There's been a lot of other ideas. I had another idea. I think that this is a better idea than that one. All of the other ideas that we've kind of pushed back and forth have run up against NIMBYism, the attractive nuisance issue, and frankly, political will. And I think that having EDSO on board with this, I think that this is the most viable path forward that I've seen this entire time. So I also feel really hopeful about this, and I'm happy to support this concept. There's certainly details that will need to be forthcoming before we can, give full approval. But I look forward to seeing those details, and I'm excited about this. I think that this is a great start. So thank you to everyone.
Thank you. One of the biggest hurdles that the city has always had, and Councilmember Zaragoza alluded to this or kind of nailed on it, is the funding. And the funding is really, the sheriff's going to stand up of some officers to work with this, and frankly, his budget is about 6 times the budget of the city of Placerville, just in the sheriff's office alone, if you want to put it in perspective. That doesn't mean he has a bunch of money sitting around that he doesn't know how to spend, because he still has vacant positions and a lot of things that he's got a really beautiful building over there he's paying for too. So he has his own set of expenses. So it's not to say that he has money sitting around. But the point is that the city definitely does not have money sitting around, and we're going to have to make some tough decisions as we go along here too, to figure out at what level and how we can participate. And all this, right now this is conceptual. It's a great idea. We have great people championing this process. Some of the things that I really like to hear is that the women and children are going to have a special place for them to be safe, and I can't tell you how important that is to me. The mental health issues, you talked about that briefly there, Sheriff, and I think, this is one of the, with the entrenched homeless and those that are really challenged, there's some people that just can't grasp some of these concepts, and it is really challenging for them. And I've talked to them. I deal with them on a periodic basis. And I tell you what, that's probably going to be our number one, if you talk about really just heart-wrenching challenges to figure out how to move through a process like this, that's going to be one of them. It's going to be challenging. And so, talking about finding resources for mental health to bring this through, having resources for funding from the COC to help support and stand up this program, all these things are going to need participation. There are organizations, and over the years, by the way, Vandekars, Don, and Jane, Peg. Right. Jay McGinnis. Okay, got it. Thank you guys for all that you have done over the years to support and help and take care of these homeless individuals. I know where your heart is, and you guys have just really done an amazing job for our community to help support them over the years when there wasn't a lot of support out there. So I just want to express my appreciation there. Thank you. And one of the other things that we briefly touched on is law enforcement. And one of the pieces of this puzzle is our community basically reaching out to the law enforcement and letting them know what laws are being broken, and our law enforcement is actually working on committed to stepping up enforcement on these actions where they need to be done, so that when those things happen, you know, one of the things you talked about is drug use and drug abuse, and the sheriff alluded to this. It's going to be an important part of this, that we do enforcement, and that comes along with the homeless court. And you know, I hope the DA. Do you know, Sheriff, if the DA have you had conversations with the DA about a homeless court or those ideas, or the courts?
Yes, he's on board.
All right, because that's, to me, is a big piece of this puzzle too, is giving them opportunities to, one, and then also have opportunities to help them understand that they are really breaking the law. To me, this, you know, Jackie, you talk about putting conditions on this right now. I think expressing our concerns right now, I think, is important. I don't think I want to start off this with concerns, but just conceptually, do we agree with this idea? We don't. So that's kind of where I'm going with this right now.
I hear what
are
you're
your
saying,
thoughts?
but we sent you with a direction to the county to ask the county to designate sites. And you came back without the county designating any sites, without a plan if this gets more than 100 people. And I don't want to not have a plan moving forward. I don't want to have the county just go, oh, well, it's all the city's problem again. Like you said, we've been dealing this for 10 years. And the county needs to step up and be part of that solution in a bigger way, where we're not going to, you know, get to 6 months from now and oops, there's no plan and we're over capacity.
And plans
So
change.
am I hearing you right, Jackie? If I don't have a plan for over 100, then you don't want to support it?
I said I want the county to designate the place for when we're going to get over 100 people. I know that you are optimistic.
Jackie, the county's not going to do it, just like you're not going to do it. That's why I'm saying this is the best plan we have moving forward.
Okay, so you're saying the county is not going to be cooperative. That's what I'm hearing. The county
No, the
wants
county's
to
gonna
dump
be
it all in
supportive
the
of
city.
this project moving forward, just like I think we're going to have at least 4 votes from your council. But if you're asking that this is not going to be successful if we don't have a plan for over 100, then you're not willing to take the chance on something that can work, because nobody is going to give you a commitment that we have a plan for over 100 right now. I can't stand there and look at you and tell you that, and nobody will.
I will tell you, the city has taken all the chances, and the city is the one who's gotten smacked all the time. And yeah, I need more cooperation from the county.
All right. The city, in my opinion, the city is a natural place for homeless to congregate. I don't think we're going to avoid that. It's something that is true. The COC is working on a program that you know, it's frustrating to say the least to see how far out it's going. Now, they do a lot of good things through the COC for a variety of different people, but it's not moving the needle for the issue of homeless in the city of Placerville. And that's really a lot of what this is talking about, is homeless in the city of Placerville and the homeless that are out in the woods in the county. That's what this is addressing. And, you know, the county is stepping up to do something. And yes, it's in the city, but it has to be around city services. It has to be around these. At least the first swipe needs to be. And I think this is a good first swipe at this.
Well, our proposal when we went to the county was we were going to have a smaller campground in the city to accommodate the city, and now this proposal is going to bring 30 more people into the city. And I haven't heard the agreements from the county. You said the county is working with us in the agreements, but
This is really in the beginning stages. We're not going to have agreements right now. What we have is a concept. And so we're going to, hopefully, my goal is to support the county in moving this concept forward. And it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to have all the bells and whistles that we want. And it's going to help give us the opportunity to deal with the Boise law. And if we don't do anything right now, if we all decide this is no good in the city, and we tell them to go away, thank you very much. We did that with the Highway 50, didn't work so well. It's going to be a huge loss. And I'm not saying that we can't have conversations going around down the road that that help us have a better opportunity to impact the solutions that we're coming up with. But right now, this isn't the time for that, I don't think.
Oh, you're asking the city to take a chance. We took a chance on Hangtown Haven, and we paid big prices. What I'm looking for is some insurance moving forward that we're not going to be the only solution in El Dorado County, and our residents aren't going to be the only one paying the price.
Okay.
So I kind of want to back Jackie up a little bit. Between here and the county line is what, 15 miles? I don't know, something like that. But we've got two pretty large, and even though they're not cities, they're larger, the population is larger than the city of Placerville. And they all contain businesses just like we do. And I'm talking about El Dorado Hills, I'm talking about Cameron Park, you know. So I think this is what Jackie is alluding to, and I'm putting words in your mouth, I'm sorry, that there's other areas in here, like Dennis, you were saying that they're drawn to the city for those reasons, but those, to me, those two places also have those same services. And so I think, if I'm wrong.
They don't have the health and
They
human
don't-
services and the hospital.
Except
and those
that
types
we
of
don't
things.
either. I mean, you know, we
No,
have.
No, the health and human services resides in the city.
Exactly. But like Sheriff D'Agostini was saying, we have to take those services, and even to this camp. So and I know that there's satellites with a lot of these services, because I've seen the buildings that they've put in Cameron Park, and, you know, so there's satellites where these services could be transferred. So I think, is that what you're?
Yeah, I mean, if there's one thing COVID has taught us is that we can be mobile. It doesn't all have to be in one spot, and Cameron Park has had a homeless problem. So to say that they've always come to the city isn't correct either, because they've been between here and Cameron Park and every nook and cranny outside the city limits also.
I didn't say always, because I know that all the places in the county have these problems, but generally they congregate where services are, where food is, and where city is. You know, that's just that. I don't know how else to say that. So, and I also agree that down the road, there's a lot of different ways to deal with the homeless as they move through and become move through homelessness into more stable situations, and that is part of the scattered site model. This is a place, in my opinion, they're going to be moving through this. They're not going to be staying there. Now, some are going to be staying there for six months, a year, because they need that, and then some are going to be staying there for just a short period of time because they're more prepared to move on. And I believe that, and that's the whole health and human services issue that I think is still an empty.
So let me just ask you this specifically. What the proposal that came from Liz is looking at almost 500 people. Are you supportive of that next to the jail?
That is not a real, Sheriff, can you help me out with that? Because that is not a real number, and I'm not sure where that number came from, because I don't know that. While we have a pit count, that, I don't believe that those are the true numbers of the homeless that we are talking about for this camp.
Okay, I'm just telling you, when I was reading through the plans, and she's saying how many people can be in a neighborhood, and, you know.
Again, that's called the hostess concept. It is just a concept. We've already changed and figured a bunch of stuff that we can't do because of the Constitution, because of laws. It's a concept. The numbers that we had Monday morning for in the dirt homeless, the ones that are out in the bush, living in tents, is 93 total, 62 in the county and 62 in Placerville and 31 in the county.
No, I'm concerned that we're not looking forward.
What's that?
I just said I'm concerned that we're not looking forward from a year from now, from 2 years from now, from 3 years from now, how many they're going to be. Depending, I mean, right now, the state is doing things that could cause homeless to increase substantially, depending on what they do or don't fund.
If I may. Jackie, I hear your concerns and I appreciate them. I do agree with Mayor Thomas that we're being asked to, decide whether or not we want to embrace this concept as a joint venture. And I think we should. So I don't want to be dismissive of your concerns. I agree that this is not the time, the time that we can really dig into the details is when we have the details, which will be forthcoming. This is about the concept. And I would like to make a motion that we approve the concept.
All right.
I'll second.
Second, thank you. Any further discussion on that motion? Is that what we're looking for, basically, from the city? Okay. Direction.
Yeah, that works for now. I will let you know, there's already a staff level meeting set up for this Friday that we're going to start discussing this with the county. And
so we approve this concept, and in that it gives the city manager direction to start discussions
basically
and
continue to
negotiations with
work
that.
on it, correct. And then we will come back to you with more details, costs, et cetera, for your approval.
All right. Any further discussion?
No, I mean, to Jackie's point, and this is going to be something we have to look at from a long-term perspective, and I know the sheriff knows this as well, is we are severely lacking affordable housing in any type, whether it be rentals, purchase, or anything. So as and I know, I've had this conversation with Don Simone, is if you're moving one person out at a time in terms of graduating somebody from being homeless into a home, the county can do that. If we're moving 20 people at a time, 30, there's not a capacity in the housing out there to be able to do that. So it's something that we're going to have to deal with, because it's still not, and we have about 240 units over the next, maybe 2 or 3 years, but it's not next year. I think 2 years is probably even that's optimistic. But we're probably the closest to those housing coming to fruition. So that long-term plan has got to be part of that conversation as well with the county, because there's no way, if you had 30 people today that said, we want to go into, we've graduated from our, we've got our skills, whatever, we have nowhere to put them today. So that's got to be something that we address as we go forward as well. It is a little bit of a jump into the unknown. I mean, we're taking that leap of faith, but knowing that I'm do that with eyes wide open, because I know that there's still that missing component to it as we go forward.
All right.
Mayor, could I make?
I was going to ask
I'm sorry.
Cleve, I was just going to say, maybe Cleve, you could shed some light.
I want to make just one more comment. I want to remind everyone that this, yes, it did come up very fast, and it's something that we're working on to put together. We don't have all the details. We hope to get those in the next few weeks. But the other point I want to make is, remember, I see this as very short-term, transitional, to get us to what Councilmember No, you're talking about, and for what is our long-term solution. Recall that I believe the end of this month, Don Simone is going to make a presentation on where we are with the strategic plan, and et cetera, to the Board of Supervisors. I also plan to have him make that presentation to the City Council. That strategic plan will be completed, and that's what our long-term plan is, really, the strategic. This does not have a long-term component. My goal and my hope is that this can bridge that gap between today and when the implementation can happen from the strategic plan for homeless, that will bring funding from the state and federal government, et cetera, to implement those solutions that they come up with for the strategic plan. So, yeah, there is no long-term solution necessarily in this. And my hope is that, and I think the sheriff would agree with me, that we want to make this short-term, and that the strategic plan of the county will take over. And this will, hopefully, this goes away, or it's morphed into something that meets those long-term goals for housing, for services, and et cetera, that the county has. So,
I would say that would be a component of the long-term goals,
Correct.
rather than meets them.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Any further discussion before we go to a roll call vote?
So just define short-term for me, Cleve.
Well, from my experience, they adopt a strategic plan this fall, let's say. We adopt with them, they adopt the strategic plan. I think you're talking 2 to 3 years to get meaningful programs implemented after that, just from my experience and the way, I hate to say it, I'm part of that, but the way government works and this bureaucracy that we're stuck in. And so that's what I see, 1 to 2 years is where I see that this program would be in place.
Thank you, Cleve. Any further discussion? All right, okay. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Taylor?
Aye.
Mayor Thomas?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Zaragoza?
Aye.
I'm sorry.
No.
And Councilmember No.
Aye.
All right, thank you, everybody, for that discussion. We are going to take a 10-minute break, and we'll be back in 10. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and bring this meeting back to order.
Bang your gavel.
Ladies and gentlemen. Oh, that worked. All right. I didn't mean to run you all out. You could stay. All right. Have a lovely evening. Thank you. All right. Where did everybody go?
Sue,
For those out in TV land.
Sue's still here, thank goodness.
For those out in TV land, there's one person left in the
Thank
audience.
goodness we have Sue.
And I'm surprised nobody's here to talk about item number 12, approving placing the city's parklet at the previous parking space in front of 451 Main Street. And this is going to be Mr. Zeller.
Good evening. Can
Good
everybody
evening.
hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so real quick, this is an item that was that's being brought to the council's attention for an approval, and really the goal is to get the parklet, which is right now still in storage up at the courtyard, and get it placed back on the area that is just on the westbound lane, just east of the bulb out at 451 Main Street. And that was the place that it had been originally in 2019 before it was picked up. So just to remind the council, this was the parklet was donated by the county to the city, and there was some work that had been done on looking at a process on where to move it long term. But we thought we would put that on hold right now and just get an approval, if the council desires, to get that parklet put back at that 451 Main location. And that would be from the point where we get some minor repairs done to it and get it out there until late October, early November. So, and then cost-wise, we did use a wrecker that had a towing truck that had a flatbed, because that was the way that we thought we could move it with the least amount of damage. It does come apart, but it is pretty tedious to take it apart, and we thought that we would try the old grab it and go method, and that seemed to work okay. So that's the gist of the staff report, and I can take any questions.
Thank you very much, Terry. Any questions for Terry on this?
No, I'd like to hear from the public.
All right. That's my job, but okay. Anybody else? No questions? All right. Let's open this up for public comment. I'm glad you're here. It'd be lonely without you.
And I have a public safety concern with the parklet location. For pedestrian visibility and pedestrian safety, the parklet needs to be put west, not east of the bulb out. It needs to be west of the public so that pedestrians on the crosswalk are visible to motorists coming west on Main Street, because the way you put it in last year, it was not visible, and any little kid coming out from behind the parklet, who was shorter than the parklet, you could not see until they were in the street. So for public safety, the parklet was neat, but please put it on the west side of the bulb out so that traffic moving westbound will have a chance to see pedestrians walking in front of, not behind, that parklet as they try to cross the street there on Main Street. That's my comment.
Can't seem to get these buttons straight. Thank you, Sue. Anybody else for public comment? Anybody? All right, then. Sorry, I couldn't help myself.
Smarty.
All right, bring it back for council and further discussion. I had that same question that Sue had about the idea of placing it west, and I don't know if that impacts commercial parking. I was trying to bring it up on a map, but I didn't come up too quick, so.
There is actually one non-commercial space right between right next to the bulb out on that west side.
Mhm. And then it goes to a yellow zone in front of.
And then it's a yellow commercial zone, and then there's an alleyway in
In
front
front
of
of the
that.
needle, yeah.
I actually kind of agree with Sue. I know we've looked at this throughout, but I think having the parklets on the west side not only helps that visibly, but it gives some protection for the parklet. You've got the bulb out between the cars and the parklet to a certain extent. So I kind of agree. I think if we were going to consider moving it to that location, we may want to at least talk to the business that is there and see if I'll mention, I know who runs that business. I think they would be okay with it, but.
I know originally they were not opposed to the idea.
Correct.
And,
Correct.
And also there's the other one, which is the lighthouse that is right there as well, but
Yeah.
they're right at the bulb out too, so. Any thoughts on this, Terry?
Yeah, my only thought was, and I had talked to Pierre about this too, is that the goal of putting it on the eastern side of the bulb out was to try to prevent people from backing into it when they're doing their parallel parking. That is a yellow zone that it will be right next to, so there may be a higher incidence of folks that aren't judging very well to hit it. But I do understand the concern of the visibility, especially with folks. The bulb out does have a little bit of space between the ramp and the edge of the bulb out. It's a pretty wide one, and so there is a little bit of a sight triangle that people will have if they're actually going the speed limit for being able to slow down for pedestrians. But I see the concern on both.
Is the juice worth the squeeze to move it? Do you think it's, are you overly concerned, or?
No, I think that the council's direction is fine, that we could put it there, barring any concerns from the folks that do the yoga or the needle crafts.
Oh, it looks,
That's
okay.
Kelsey's, isn't it? That's there.
It would be more directly in front of the yoga shop
yoga
than
shop, right.
the Kelsey's, so.
Yeah, it's pretty much right in front of their sign in their window.
Yeah, pretty much. Okay, I'm just looking at it on Google Earth. All right, any further comments?
No, I would just make a motion to approve it, with the caveat if the business owner doesn't have a problem, but if not, then do it on the other side.
I'll second it.
East side.
All right, since there's money here, let's go ahead and get a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Taylor?
Aye.
Mayor Thomas?
Aye.
Councilmember Saragosa?
Aye.
Councilmember Nell?
Aye.
All right. Moving on to item 12.2, receive and file final draft scoping memo as prepared and submitted by REY Engineering for the Cedar Ravine Sewer Replacement Project. Now, this is one that I don't know why more people aren't here, because this is an interesting, crazy project. Just looking at all what could possibly go on to get this thing to go through, but we're still in that phase where we're not going to impact the public yet. But as soon as we start talking about it, it's going to really I think. I don't know. I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca, though, for the finer details, and then back to us. Thank you, Rebecca.
What an introduction.
I know, sorry. My head was spinning when I read this thing. It was just...
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Good to see you all this evening, and it warms my heart that you want to talk about engineering things. It kind of validates my nerdy existence, so I really appreciate that.
You're welcome.
So the item before you has two purposes. The first is to daylight a project that's been a priority for the city for some time now, the Cedar Ravine Sewer Replacement Project. The second is to have an open discussion with City Council and the public and Sue on possible solutions to address this project. The Cedar Ravine Sewer Replacement Project proposes to remove an existing 6-inch sewer, cast iron, from the channel of Cedar Ravine Creek. Segments of this sewer not only traverse the creek, but some are actually located underneath the buildings within the creek alignment, making them nearly impossible to maintain, inspect, or adequately replace in like kind. This was identified as a key project in the city's ongoing efforts to reduce inflow and infiltration, I&I, where creek water infiltrates into the city sewer system when the water level is higher than the top of the pipe, which also causes the sewer to operate under pressure. This entire segment of sewer found in the channel is a cause for concerns related to sewer spills in the channel, maintenance, and other forms of liability, including but not limited to public health and safety. With all of these concerns and potential hazards, you may wonder why we haven't daylighted the urgency of doing this project, and that's because it's a hard project and there is no easy solution, much to what the mayor alluded to. In 2019, which feels about 17 years ago now, the city contracted with REY engineers to develop a preliminary scoping memo, which is attached to staff's report. The memo assessed the existing conditions, alignment, condition of connections and access, material accessibility, service locations, and a video inspection of the existing main. It also assessed the existing 10-inch sewer that's located within Cedar Ravine Road. The memo developed recommended improvements and proposed alternatives. I'll cover those alternatives and encourage a discussion that will give some direction to staff, if even only in concept, on how to move forward with this project. Two alternatives were proposed. Alternative A proposes replacing the existing 6-inch sewer collection in the creek with a new 6-inch line and access manholes located on the west bank of Cedar Ravine Creek. This places it in the front yards of the properties fronting the creek. Then it crosses the creek in one location and connects to a new 10-inch collection sewer in Cedar Ravine Road. This alternative is estimated at $1.92 million. $2.2 million with the service replacement recommended improvements. Alternative B involves the removal of an existing 10-inch clay pipe and replace with a deeper 10-inch PVC main. This would also place the new main almost 5 feet deeper than the existing main. The reason why this is important to recognize is if there's ever a segment that needs to be replaced, it makes it exponentially harder the deeper you go. The reason for the depth would be to allow gravity flow as sewer services are placed under the creek. The services would be installed by trenching or boring through bedrock below the flow line of the creek channel, and this alternative is estimated at $4.11 million, but with the sewer service improvements, it places it at about $5.5 million. And this covers everything. The larger numbers I'm saying right now reflect what's shown in the last page of the memo, and they include all the soft costs. Soft costs are construction management, design, right-of-way, et cetera. Both alternatives have a complete list of advantages and disadvantages in the scoping memo that I invite everyone to review. Since this is not a new project, I'd also like to float another alternative to be added to the discussion for this evening. For some time now, staff, along with members of the public and residents on Cedar Ravine Road, have desired a proper sidewalk with ADA access that can properly serve our fine residents. This includes a gentleman near and dear to my heart, Mr. Lynn Miller, who we have seen travel in the roadway in his wheelchair on a regular basis to access Main Street. Cedar Ravine also serves as a direct connection via Thompson Road to Sierra Elementary School. We also have received requests to provide on-street parking on the west bank of Cedar Ravine Road for the residents that front the creek. Currently, there isn't enough space for sidewalks or on-street parking on Cedar Ravine. Furthermore, the road shoulder on Cedar Ravine is eroding as a result of creek flow and organic fill material. Future shoulder maintenance is a certainty. This third alternative would propose to enclose Cedar Ravine Creek in either a pipe or culvert, properly sized, and it would provide space for the on-street parking and sidewalk. City policy supports exposed creeks and waterways, and in the interest of public safety, I would be remiss if this option wasn't at least brought up. Boxing the culvert would also allow placement of a new main in Cedar Ravine Road, and it would actually still preserve and make good use of the existing 10-inch main rather than replacing it with a deeper main. The existing 10-inch main is actually in really good condition. This also removes the liability of crossing the creek by enclosing the creek itself. I don't have a firm cost estimate, but a quick back-of-the-napkin estimate places this at about $3.7 million, which is right in between the cost of Alternative A and Alternative B. This concludes my verbal report, and I look forward to this discussion and direction. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Wow. All right. Boy, I don't know where to go with this. Anybody have any questions?
I have quite a few.
Okay.
I have 6 to 10 questions. Do you want them all at one time or one at a time?
Whatever you like.
Okay. Maybe I'll do them all at one time and then you can kind of, okay. So how much will the design part cost? Because some of them, or is that the 20%?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah,
Just
those are the
kinda
soft
straight
costs
across
that
the
are
board. Okay.
identified in the last page of the report.
Okay.
So when they say soft costs, that's the 20%, and it's a pretty round estimate number that we use in projects.
Okay. So this report referenced, potential future street widening. And I was wondering with that, would an easement be needed to do that work? And if so, would an easement for Alternative A also serve that purpose? Another question is, why would a property owner give an easement for this with the potential to have odor in their yard? What would motivate them to do that? And obviously this is a big ticket item, so would this be funded solely out of I'm assuming that this would be funded with federal and state infrastructure dollars that are coming, or would they be, is this, scheduled for measures H and L? How urgent is the need for this? And what about just, if the main concern is the sewer line in the creek, what about just encasing it in concrete? And I think those are my questions.
Those were mine too, actually.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, can we just like build septic for like each of those 11 houses
I
along
asked
there
that.
too? And not worry about all this?
So I'll actually answer that question first. City code does not really encourage or support septic if there's a sewer main within 200 feet per building code, and so we don't usually do that, especially not next to a creek.
But we have the power.
How much will be designed? I think I answered that with 20% round estimate numbers. We usually will come up with the cost of construction and back into the soft costs as a percentage. Typically speaking, we look at for design, it's roughly anywhere from 8 to 12%, as high as 15, kind of depending upon the complexity of the project. For right-of-way, it's about 10%. And then you kind of add in different percentages for construction management. Construction management can be anywhere from 12 to 20%, kind of depending if it's night work. I could see this becoming night work if we're putting a new main in Cedar Ravine. Mm-hmm. Would an easement be needed for Alternative A? Yes. Would an easement be needed for street widening? Yes. So why would they give an easement? So we have some pretty aged homes on Cedar Ravine, and with those aged homes comes aged sewer services. And per the city code, they're actually responsible to replace the services all the way to the main. We are only, per the code, we're only obligated liability of the collection system. So why would they give an easement? It allows a mechanism to place a new service with a new main that has a service life of 50 to 80 years. And then they can sell the house whenever, or their kids sell the house whenever, and say, you know, look, this is when the city did this project, this has a newer sewer services, which doesn't sound like an attractive selling point on a home unless you're buying an older home. But there is a lot of benefit to the homeowner in getting this addressed. You know, as far as the houses that actually go and span over the creek, it would be good to pull those services out to the front. We can't do anything about the creek alignment in that capacity unless we culvert or box it. So there are some advantages to each resident. And I want to be clear about kind of our right-of-way process too. We deal with right-of-way acquisitions and easement acquisitions on almost every project. And we actually take a lot of time and care, and we address it parcel by parcel, person by person. We've been, knock on wood, pretty successful in not having to go through a condemnation project, because the city's stance is we don't take away or encumber a property with easements unless we absolutely have to. And this would be a situation where we would say it would be a good idea. Funded, how would it be funded? State, federal dollars, that's a potential. We are looking at, there's some water quality grant funding that would be available that could support this. It does address water quality, obviously, in the form of having a sewer and an active creek channel. If we don't use that as kind of that argument, I think encasing a sewer main wouldn't have as strong of an argument for that source of funding. But the other thing too is, I kind of mentioned it in my report about encasing the line in concrete. So we're talking about a pretty old cast iron line. Like a car, it's only got so many miles in it before the engine's got to go, right? So encasing it in concrete doesn't really solve the issue. It just kicks the can down the road. And also when the water level goes higher than the pipe, I alluded to this in my talking points earlier, you have a situation where it's what's called your hydraulic grade line. Once your hydraulic grade line or your water surface elevation is higher than a pipe, your pipe now functions under pressure. And that is something we don't want. And it also, you know, you can encase a pipe as well as you possibly can, and you'll still get I&I somewhere. So that's, and kind of going back to our focus and policy about wanting to reduce I&I. So, you know, we haven't been able to successfully eliminate it throughout the city yet. We are working on it. What we've done in the interim while we work on our I&I issues is we've, if you can't control how fast the ball's being thrown at you, you improve your catcher's mitt, and that's what we've been doing within projects improvements at the plant. So I think I answered it, but I want to kind of check with you on that too.
I think so. And then I had one other question, and then I lost it, but maybe it will come back to me. So thank you.
No problem.
So the funding is probably, right now, what are you asking for funding? I've kind of lost a little bit in that aspect of it.
So for funding, we actually already have Measure H&L funds appropriated to this project. We don't have any federal state funds at this time. We are moving towards a direction of getting it shovel-ready, plans and specs. That makes it a more appealing package to apply for funding, and it certainly allows a little cleaner delivery.
Is that the 677-040?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And we've been adding money steadily over the last several CIP cycles, not necessarily every year, but kind of depositing money in the sock drawer for this project, if you will. So we do have some money available in there that will help us move forward on this. And I had a thing I wanted to mention too about the funding. That'll come back. Sorry.
What would happen if we did nothing? And now, short-term, long-term, what you know, you have worked on this. I'm sure you have looked at this pipe more than once. Mm-hmm. Where are we at in terms of your projected, you know, it's going to be, we got to do it now, we got 2 or 3 years, we have 5 years, could be done in 10 years.
So, and I apologize, I didn't answer the question of how urgent is this. I apologize. So, as far as the urgency of do we need to do something right this minute? No, but we leave ourselves continuously open for liability. All it takes is a hefty tree branch and that line is smoked.
Okay.
So one thought would be, and I always look to, luckily he's being able to take some time off and rest and recuperate, but I always look to Nick and sometimes for my panic gauge. And every time we look at that pipe in the creek, I see the vein come up on his forehead, which, I always tell, folks, don't panic until I panic. Well, when Nick panics, he and I usually have the same panic level.
Yeah. This project, have you talked to the residents along there about this, and were they notified of this particular meeting?
I don't think that they were directly notified. We have talked to them on an individual basis, and certainly when REY was out doing the field work, they did talk to them about it. As far as direct communication, that kind of comes a little later. And part of this, now I remember what I was going to say earlier, part of this reason for bringing this item forward is to kind of get a gauge even from the stance of, what's a deal breaker as far as what we're looking at as options. A lot of times people don't know what they want, but they certainly know what they don't want, and that's just as valuable of information. So that's why we wanted to have this discussion.
Was there any feedback on the idea of, the covering the creek through there from the
we've talked about it
residents?
informally on a staff level. Actually, we talked about it yesterday. It's an idea that's been kicked around at least for almost as long as I've been here. And then, asking the question saying, hey, have you guys ever got a feel for it one way or another? And it was like, no, but we always kind of thought it was probably a good idea. And, kind of a mixed review of, well, we know we want to kind of daylight creeks, but this one's kind of not the main one. And so it's a mixed bag.
Do creeks like this, and I gotta ask the question, somebody will anyway, does this fall into any historical aspects of the city, road, bridges,
Technically
rocks, trees?
speaking?
Well, yes.
A little bit, but not,
What's- yeah.
there's room for discussion on that.
With the idea of capping it and turning it into a city street, it adds a certain appeal to the street down there. It gives you that sense that you're in a small town and there's still a creek running right in front of your house, and that, you don't get that too often. If I was a resident there, I'd be thinking, do I want a city street with a wide sidewalk, or do I want the creek running in front? And then the question is, if we get all the residents together and they say they want option B and they want to spend our $5 million, or the $5 million from some source, government money, people's money, or do they want to spend the $3 million plus dollars? At what point how does, I guess we get to decide how much of an input that means to us. At the same time, I just go back and forth on that. And here we are having to make this decision of which road or pipe to go down.
So one more component of this is kind of to your point, you don't really see creeks on the fronts of properties very often anymore. You also have to contend with, being that property owner also has to contend with the bridge crossings over the creeks. We've actually, in the last several years, we've had a lot of folks have to come in to replace their bridge crossings, and there's quite a few of them that need to be replaced. So there could be a benefit, and I'm not opposed to looking at even a hybrid solution, do a little bit of, Alt A and the box culvert Alt C, right? Or, and it doesn't have to be a box culvert, it can be a pipe. It can be an arch culvert. There's a whole host of things you can do differently. But
Certain cool factor to having a bridge to your house, even if it's only
I know, right?
15 feet long.
Yeah, but if you have to pay for replacement of it, the coolness factor has seemed to evaded those residents that have come in for building permits.
Okay. So in approving this, you talk about, well, we could do a hybrid this or a hybrid that. Today, you're asking us to make one of three decisions at least. Yeah, that's your proposed
Well,
options.
even to the point where conceptually, you can tell me, what you guys love and what you hate. And then, if I need to, I can, kind of go back to the consultant and go back to staff, and we can figure out something else and come back.
I mean, I don't know, I hate, because I agree, I mean, I do think there's, both of you are right. I mean, there is something cool about having that brand. I've always thought that was I've always loved that street because of that. And thought it, always looked great. It was sort of, what I thought of Placerville. On the other hand, if I owned it, maybe I have a different opinion. Be like, I don't want to pay $30,000 to rebuild a little bridge over, to my driveway, or I can't afford it, if for whatever reason. That being said, though, it sounds like because you had sort of that as an option C, if you will, and then this sort of Alt A, Alt B. I'm wondering if it isn't better to maybe go back with the consultant, maybe flesh those out a little bit more, so that we would have numbers behind those, at least even if we know they're rough estimates at this point. Because I could see the benefits of an Alt A, Alt B, for lack of a better term, where you have some openings and, some maybe is paved. But I'd want to know more about what that conceptually looks like and, what kind of cost factor that would be as well. I don't know.
Rebecca, have we talked, what is the thought on long range, widening Cedar Ravine?
That was a concept we've talked about, even in so much as, EDCTC has kind of said, hey, if we ever wanted to get CMAQ funding to do, this project, you could box the culvert and put on.
So that's what I'm thinking, that maybe that might be a way to pursue it and put the pipe, move it over along and widen the road, put it under the road. If you do is that possible? I'm looking at it from a point that south area is really popular, and it's kind of used a lot as that's where I was thinking maybe funding might come through if we propose something like that, and the pipe was, and that sewer pipe was included, like we did on Highway 50. That kind of a project.
So I want to make sure I'm hearing you correctly. So kind of look at.
I'm not sure what I'm talking about, so good luck.
Well, so looking at a range of funding options based on the project description. Like, if we do Alt A, what are our funding options? If we do Alt B, what are our funding options? And vice versa with C. Is that where you were headed with that question?
Well, I'm just looking at different, maybe a whole different concept, that where funding would come in if we changed some,
Yeah, so I think, Patty, you're trying to basically saying, could we leverage like EDCTC funds or other
exactly
to help lessen the burden, if you will?
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah, there is an opportunity there. I will say, I know that, we jokingly said, the reason why, and slight pun intended, the reason why nothing's been done thus far is because all these alternatives stink. And so part of it is it's just a hard project. And it has to get done, or something has to get done, because as long as we've had this sewer line, we're pretty lucky we haven't had an issue.
I think that bridges are something to be of great concern too. I've seen a lot of them go down.
Yeah, and then they impede flow in the channel.
Jackie?
Well, I think I'd like to hear from those residents, for feedback in making this decision. I drive that stretch of road every single day, and I can tell you the fairy tale bridge across to your house sounds really great, but they sit and they wait because you don't have much room to turn. And I would think that those residents would prefer a better in and out option. I'd be interested to see what they think about the culvert, because I tell you, I watch Lynn Murray and almost every day you try to go up and down there, and you're scared for him. You're absolutely scared for him. And I see other people walking as well. You know, I think if people were of that mind, we might be able to get safe route to school money, you know, because the kids from Darrington, they got a bus stop right there. They can't even walk safely down
Right.
Cedar Ravine, and you have Sierra School right up there.
Exactly.
I mean, there's a lot of opportunity there if people were open-minded to. I mean, the only people who enjoy that creek are those homeowners, because it's
Nobody else
you,
does.
yeah, you drive by it, there's no sidewalk, there's no shoulder, you know, people try to walk that all the time, and you're just hoping no one's coming the other way, because it needs, you know.
And it's so narrow, you don't dare look, even enjoy the creek.
Right. Yeah, you gotta watch for who's coming at you.
And that's in alignment with some of the complaints and conversations that we've had with residents too, both myself and Public Works too. And thank you for correcting me. I said Miller earlier. It's actually Lynn Murray. Thank you.
Yeah, but it seems like the biggest impact's gonna be on those 11 homes, and I just really
Yes.
feel like I'd like some feedback from
Yeah,
those
absolutely.
homeowners before we move forward with such a big decision.
We could also look at, you know, I kind of mentioned it earlier too, is you could do a hybrid alternative. You know, I mean, if you have, you know, a bridge that's shared 2 driveways, maybe you box the bridge and that's one of your crossings across the creek and you're not going as far with such a long lateral. There's also the option of actually, you know, removing it as being a public lateral. You could turn it into a private lateral, and then they kind of have control over that, and we basically be treated like an extended service at a 6-inch size, which we have those all through town too. So there's a couple of little nuances to each of these that we can go over. I'm sad I don't have a dry erase board to draw some pictures for you, because I think I kind of see some of the points that you're making too. So, but yes, I'm happy to go back and have the discussions with the residents too.
I think it might help our direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was curious, because is there a reason, or I guess, better question, what is the reason for having option A and then option B? And it sounds like you're saying there's ways to, you know, because one has the pipe in the road, the other one has more on the other side. But what you're saying is, not that we want to go back and forth across it, but there's ways to mitigate some of that, some of the impact to some of the houses, while also keeping it out in the street, which is probably our best option. But the street option, it's really deep, right? And so that's going to take a lot of, probably going through rock and all sorts of.
It will, yeah. We would have to actually bore underneath the creek. You know, the whole purpose, so what is the purpose of this project? To provide reliable, sustainable sewer connections for the residents in this stretch of town. And also to provide a way of getting the pipe out of the creek for a whole host of liability reasons. When it comes to, so because we do want to keep it out of the creek, we also want to limit the amount of crossings, but, you know, one option has 1 crossing and another option has, you know, like 20. So, you know, but they go underneath the creek. The second you deepen a pipe, you're now into, you know, the deeper the pipe, the more intense the shoring. There's, you know, we don't have the adequate equipment and workforce to address a small issue on a sewer main, you know, that's that deep. That's one of the reasons why we, during construction of the Blair's Lane job, they actually proposed, the original contract documents proposed the 20-inch main going underneath the creek. And we worked with Public Works, and I said, is this, I mean, these plans were kind of here, but is this really what you guys would want? And they said, no way. So we actually went back to the drawing board, and we put in a single service lift station at the Caltrans Corporation Yard, which was the driving reason, because of grade difference, that allowed us to then run the public sewer main on the bridge. So we could do something like that on the culverts. The difference between a bridge and a culvert really just comes down to span width.
Okay.
I've got a couple more questions. So in terms of, you know, the steps in this project, right now, we are looking at going into the design phase. In which case, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just kind of thinking out loud here. So we're looking at giving authorization to spend the money for design so that we can then get bids for construction. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we're in the concept part, concept to construction is how a project gets developed. So we're actually in the concept. It's kind of like your fourth date and you're thinking, am I going to keep dating this person? So that's because the project ends up being a relationship, really.
So this is not our one time to make an approval about
No,
this
no, you'll have a
incredibly
lot of
important,
bites of the apple.
expensive
Yeah.
decision. This is
So we can keep dating, is what you're saying.
You can keep dating.
we're saying we're going to keep dating.
Yeah.
So you can take the feedback that you're hearing
Yes.
to the design.
Yeah, this is great feedback. Yeah.
And then you'll come back with the design, and then we'll give authorization to go forward with bid documents if we don't get total sticker shock.
Right.
And then once you have the budget,
And funding
you'll
sources.
work magic to make the money come in, and that's how it's going to work, right?
Well, let me correct though, in order to go to design, we want to get a proposal for somebody to do the design. That's where we're
Yeah.
at right now.
Okay.
However, to do that, we need to know which design we're going to do.
Yeah.
And so my thought is we'll table this, let her take some of the ideas that or the discussion that we've had, work with that, and then come back.
I agree 100% that we should at least explore that option of, closing in the creek. I'm looking over at my Development Services Director, Pierre Voss, because we've just gone through some other things on another creek in town about, no, we can't cover the creek. I think there's maybe less issues involved, Pierre, as we've talked with Cedar Ravine. And plus, you've got the issue of the ADA issue of providing, safe pedestrian access or pedestrian transport along that area. I think that those are things that can maybe mitigate the issue of why we have to cover the creek.
And like Jackie said,
But I think we should at least explore that and get a little bit more refined cost on that. Maybe, I don't know what we have to do. We may have to ask for more money to go back to the consulting engineer that did the scoping memo to say, add this as another option to your scoping.
So do we have?
So if I could chime in
Oh,
just
please.
one
Yeah.
moment on that, sorry. The RFP, so the whole point of doing a request for proposals is basically to solicit somebody who will also help with us to develop the true project. So we're talking a public outreach component, which we would then add to an amendment to the existing contract, or we develop an RFP that says we have this scoping memo, it's attached. Here is some additional direction we receive from council in terms of public outreach, and here's the components in your scope that you need to consider. And oftentimes, we get a lot of really good information from RFPs that not only is it the consultant that we end up selecting, but a lot of them are from consultants we don't select. The city owns the ideas that are presented in these proposals, and it's kind of a great way to open up the brainstorming process. So that was one of the thoughts in having this item include allowing us to do an RFP. I would include, some of these comments, and I would also actually even include, or recommend and refer to the video of this discussion item in that RFP, that they can see this discussion and understand the context of what's going on and hear what council has to say too.
So what I'm hearing is that we don't need to table this. You can take what you've heard, work it into the RFP so that we're making sure that we are getting that outreach and that the concerns that we have are being addressed in the design process.
Yep, absolutely.
So,
I'm slightly confused. But I have another question really quick.
no, go ahead. Then I want to say something.
Perfect. On the ADA issue and our liability, or if there, because this creek has been there for hundreds, whatever. But our town has been here for what? Quite a while. And those houses are pretty old on that creek, and people have lived there. They moved there knowing they have a creek in their front yard and that there was no street frontage walkways, and all those things have been there since this was built, except for when there was a really narrow lane and people could walk there and the horses didn't run them over. Now, do we have a liability? And I'm thinking of looking at Mona a little bit. Do we have a liability with this? But it's been there. It's historic. Anybody can sue for anything. But the reality is do we have a risk here of any significance?
Are you asking if there's a liability if something happens to the pipes or?
No, let's say somebody falls in the creek and breaks a hip. Because the car was so close to them that they fell in.
Because it was so narrow, they couldn't.
My preference is not to respond to questions of exposure of the city in open session.
Yeah.
So I prefer not to answer that right now.
Okay, thank you. All right. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that as what you're hearing, are you going to maybe check into, like what Jackie brought up, safe schools, what is it, safe sidewalks to school? I mean, that we might be able to bring in a myriad of funding?
Yeah, I mean,
Grouping it, for all the things that have been mentioned here tonight.
We're in a really good part of the conceptual phase where there are almost no bad ideas.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're open to anything, and I appreciate the feedback from council because, that's 5 different perspectives and 5 different experiences on everything. And so there's a lot of value in even this discussion.
Well, if anybody is against covering the creek, it would be me, because I've really, I am so sorry for the creek being enclosed but it's been in back of the buildings, and I think it's a whole different, thing that we're talking about. So again, to Jackie's point, talk to the homeowners, and to Dennis's point that a lot of these homes were purchased years and years ago before we had the mode of transportation that we have now, and, things that, I think in the olden days, people just accepted a lot of things that are not acceptable now.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to open it up for public comment. Sorry to keep you waiting so long while we talked about this, Sue. I know that you want to talk on this.
Oh, yes. Sue Rodman, member of the Measure H&L Committee, which is looking at providing at least some of the funding for this. And Measure H and Measure L Committee, when we first started, said one of the prime objectives we would like to have is to get sewer lines out of the creeks, all of the sewer lines out of all of the creeks. And we brought up not only Hangtown, but our main sewer line that goes into the plant runs down a creek bed. Cedar Ravine runs down a creek bed. Well, you can see why it was done that way. In pioneer times, you put the pipes where they were accessible, where they were easy to get to and easy to fix. And nobody worried about the water quality in the creek. So the natural thing to do was put your water lines in the creek and your sewer lines in the creek. However, we have come to find out that's really not the best place to put sewer lines. It's probably not the best place to put water lines either. And so one of the things that Measure H and Measure L wants to do is to get the sewer lines and hopefully the water lines, when they can be done simultaneously, out of the creeks. Cedar Ravine is a narrow road. It's highly used. It's the access not only for the school but the hospital. So you have large ambulances driving on it. You have large school buses driving on it. If you drive on it every day, as I heard somebody say they do, you will notice that that bank is eroding into the road. In several places, the road's getting narrower, and there is nothing, the drop-off goes from the road straight down, and it's edging into the road itself. I hate to see any creek put into a box culvert. It's not my preferred alternative, but for Cedar Ravine, it may be the best alternative because it is so narrow And the houses that are there, if they would prefer to have a sewer line running down the front yard, it's done in other places. When they need to move the sewer line and it needs to be in your front yard, it goes in the front yard. It happened to our home in Twin Falls, Idaho, when they put in a sewer and got rid of all the septic and systems. They put the sewer line next to the highway, right down everybody's front yard. And did they have a choice? No. That's just where it went. I think that's not a bad alternative, but I think we do need to get that sewer line out of the creek. Paying $10,000 a day to the Water Quality Board for leaks is not fun either. And that's not, we try to avoid those. I'm glad to see some progress being made so that people are at least looking at some alternatives for Cedar Ravine Creek. It's also a fact that it's too narrow, and I see the little kids trying to walk to school along Cedar Ravine, and I just cringe. The guy with his wheelchair is even more concerning. And so I think we do need to do something for public health and safety in terms of being able to use that road. As far as the bridges go, I did see one where the propane tank got the wrong address and he went across a bridge that was not built to take that heavy a truck and ended up with the propane tank in the truck in the creek, and the bridge collapsed around it. And they had quite a time getting the tow truck and crane and everything else to get the propane tank out, and then they had to rebuild the bridge anyway. So I think, and I've seen some bridges, I've seen some of them when they were rebuilt, and I've seen some others that are there now that probably should be rebuilt. And I would hate to try to come out onto Cedar Ravine with the traffic that it handles now from a bridge and be able to turn either way onto that road. I'm not sure you could even make a right-hand turn onto it because I don't think you've got the clearance. You'd still have to go into the left-hand lane to get out. So I'm glad to see Rebecca bringing her skills to this one because I think it's definitely an issue that the city needs to look at. And I think looking at it from the safety of the school children and people trying to walk, other people trying to walk. And I've gone over my time. I don't usually go
maybe
over
by a
my
little
time.
bit. I've been really patient here. So.
Yeah, we need to do something with Cedar Ravine. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Sue.
Thank you for your patience today.
You bet. All right. So do we? I got lost in the fact that do we need to do anything, or you're going to do something and then come back to us?
It would, so the only thing that would transpire is I would develop an RFP and release it, and that would be approved through minute order. That's the process that we selected for this because we're kind of receiving direction, which this discussion provided the direction that I needed in terms of developing some form of alternative, but first and foremost, actually the public outreach part of it, going to the homeowners. One thing actually, and I appreciate Sue's comments because she helped me remember a particular nuance, is that the creek ownership is primarily that of the private residences that front the creek. It's mostly on their property. The other interesting part of this is we looked at some historical data of the creek, and you can actually even see some of it in terms of the improvements that are there now, is homeowners have been steadily shifting the creek east into the road. They add retaining walls to increase the front of their, usable space in their frontage and front yard. And so we actually have a couple of situations, one particular situation where an illegal retaining wall was built, I would call it in the channel. And then they shoved it over. But what happens is, water will take the path of least resistance and it just starts eroding. Well, what's it eroding? Our road. So that has been a steady issue. Definitely boxing the, putting a culvert in would kind of set, it would set a hard boundary on doing that.
All right, so I guess we're going to call this a receive and file. And that was the initial request on the item subject, receive and file the final draft scoping memo, as opposed to the options, because I really don't think we can go 1, 2, or 3 on the options.
Right.
It's more of a,
Does that work, or do you need us to give you the authority to issue the RFP?
I mean, it's whatever you are comfortable with. I would appreciate the ability to sending it out to RFP.
so the question I have for the council, are we comfortable with the direction that Rebecca has received, and you feel like it's understood, and that she can go out to an RFP, and because an RFP is going to be for a very specific scope of project, and not just a little bit of this and a little bit of that.
Correct.
Okay, so
I don't feel comfortable that I'm there yet.
But we gave you a little bit of this and a little bit of that.
then
Right?
you.
Could I?
Can I,
Please.
sorry.
Oh, I was going to take a stab at a motion.
I was going to say, perhaps what you want to do is direct her to prepare an RFP and bring it back before sending it out for your review.
I'm comfortable with that, yeah.
Yeah, I
So
think
that
we
you
need to
have a
keep
better
moving
idea
forward
of
with this.
exactly
Yeah.
what you are looking at, and you could review that at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that
Thanks for
works.
that. That's why you get paid the big bucks. Go ahead, give it a shot.
Okay, so I would move that we give you direction to prepare an RFP that includes public outreach and looking at, the other kind of nuanced alternatives that we discussed here tonight, and to bring that back for the council to review.
I'll second it.
So question, does that include a box culvert?
If it was discussed.
Yes.
Okay, is that the intent? Okay.
It's at least going to be mentioned as a potential alternative, and then.
With public outreach, if
With
if
public
that's something that the
outreach.
property owners
Yeah.
were interested in. I mean, if they're
And the community.
totally not interested in it, then,
There'll be
you know.
more, community input as well. All right, any further discussion? All right, roll call vote, please. Oh, wait, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, away we go. I saved you. Thank you for that. All right, moving on to 12.3, approve a concept, oh wait, we already did that one.
did that.
Yes. That was,
did that.
yes. That was a win. All right. Okay, item 13.
No, you, this
Are you
is,
gonna
you
go
made
back
this
to-
12
Oh,
point-
yes, 7.5 for discussion. Is it 7.7?
7.7, I believe.
I wrote 7.5.
7.7.
I miswrote. Okay, item 7.7 that was pulled from discussion on the consent calendar. For discussion.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Would you like a full report or
No.
any questions?
No, yeah,
I know it's getting late. How do you really feel, Patty?
No, what I really wanted to do, and it's unfortunate, I mean, we have Sue here, which I'm eternally grateful for, but really wanted to allow the public to see kind of, I mean, this is what we do, right?
Right.
This is our sales tax, this is what help runs the city, this is how we fund things. And it is, whether we like the sales tax structure or not, this is kind of how cities live and die. So I just wanted to kind of give the public just a snapshot of where we are today and kind of how things are going. So however, Dave, you want to just do a,
Sure.
2-minute overview or something?
Yeah, in a nutshell, what a difference a year makes.
Yeah.
So the first quarter of last year, we were entering into the pandemic. Matter of fact, I believe it was the third week of March when we started the shutdowns. And fortunately, the first quarter of 2020 wasn't too bad, but it was a kind of a weak quarter. But looking a year forward, you can see year over year on the cash basis, your Bradley Burns sales tax, which is your general fund sales tax, actually increased 22.8%. And your adopted budget assumed the whole year being negative 1.1%. Our mid-year budget report, positive 1.34. So to go from 1.34 to 22.8 is fantastic. Now, that quarter did include some prior period adjustments. There were tax deferrals, there were corrections from prior quarters that were included that inflated that number. If you take that out, it actually ends up being about 13.1%, but still very healthy, far exceeding even inflation, as crazy as inflation is right now. And then your add-on taxes, even better. For example, Measure H on the cash basis, 38.2%. On the cash basis, and then when you adjust for the tax deferrals and prior year adjustments, 18.3, which is still smoking. So very pleased. You can see the differences by the business types, and I won't go through that, but interesting reading. Our county pool for Bradley Burns continues to grow. Real quick, there was in my email to you, actually it may have been the weekly update, when we talked about this quarter, we thought that there was one of the larger online retailers misreporting, and unfortunately that did not happen, so that's real growth. And the other good thing, we just found out there's a company that they sell leases on vehicles. They haven't reported sales tax in 5 years, so we're actually going to get a windfall in the third quarter, and that'll help offset the fourth quarter adjustment that we do have with the online retailer. So that negative adjustment back from the fourth quarter of 2020 will be mostly offset by that increase. So anyway.
Dave, on that point real fast.
Yep.
So I know, because there is that change in how a certain online retailer is classifying.
Correct.
So going forward though, are we going to be it'll be a smaller figure though because of that?
Yeah, we will receive the third-party fulfillment center sales. So if you buy something from that retailer that's provided by a third party, we will receive the use tax. And we make up 20% of this whole county sales tax here in Placerville, so we'll get 20% of the action throughout the county. But for the fulfillment center that's owned by that retailer, the city that houses that fulfillment center will get all the sales tax. And I know that's a hot political issue right now that you'll probably hear more about. But for right now, it's about roughly a little over $300,000 a year hit. So.
I just think that's wrong. Think it's wrong.
And there is a push by some municipalities to, and I'll try to find the information to bring it back to the board in terms of whether it's a legislative solution or something else to help to continue it to be the way it was before, as opposed to just where the fulfillment center is.
I just don't see how they can possibly just cut it off. I don't.
Yeah, go ahead.
There also, I was going to say, I sent some information to the mayor today. I'll send it to the rest of you if you didn't get it. On the league has a resolution related to that also that will be on the league conference for consideration. So, do you get those without me sending them to you?
I don't know if I saw that
league
one, but
resolutions.
We do get them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes we get so many.
It's a reminder.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll forward it to you.
And I want to say it came from it was like a third party group. It wasn't necessarily from the league directly, but it was from a group that was going to place it on the.
Mm-hmm. They proposed the resolution, correct?
Dave, does this factor into how does this affect our budget for the upcoming year? Did we factor in this money that now we're not going to have? I know that you're always conservative about our revenue sources.
As far as the online retailer, what we assumed for our fiscal year 21-22 budget excluded that retailer. The sales tax provider, their fulfillment center. So the sales tax that we're talking about was not included in that estimate in your budget for fiscal year 21-22.
Okay.
So our budget is already accounted for that,
Okay.
so we should be good.
I had the feeling that was the case, and I'm glad to hear that.
Open this item up for public comment. All right. Okay. All right. Seeing nobody, we're going to close public comment and bring it back for an acknowledgement and file.
Thank you, Dave.
All right, moving on. Item number 13, council reports from other agencies, El Dorado County Transit Authority.
So I think I'm giving the report for all three. Everybody was gone, and I represented, except you. You were at transportation,
I was
Dennis.
at transportation.
Well, I was going to say transit. I think the good news, at least for me, I don't know about anybody else, but that we now have a daily bus to Tahoe for our residents. And the pickup will be at the Placerville station.
Nice.
And easy on, easy off, and there'll be 2 drop-offs in the Tahoe area. And then transportation, trip to Green. And LAFCO, unfortunately, Jose, who's been there with many years, we all know, has left, and his assistant is temporarily there. They're seeking a new permanent position on that. And just learned that the chair, is it Tim Palmer, has resigned, so they're going to be looking for a new chair for the board. And then Placerville Fire Safe, they were represented at National Night Out, and thanks to our fire captain, provided trucks and men to go along with them, and that was really appreciated. And I think I hope a lot of folks appreciated it and got some information. And they're just constantly working on the fire safe issue. And they're still looking for members to join them, so that's it.
LAFCO, SACOG.
Yeah, so we had the Policy and Innovation Committee meeting, as I mentioned earlier, we had that vote on AB, I believe it was 1401, regarding, the minimum parking spaces, or not having minimum parking spaces in transit areas, mostly for larger cities, but also talked about Green Means Go, and just that effort really spurred a whole statewide fund that came out of the budget, about $600 million. We're getting $34 million, plus there's competitive dollars on top of that will be able to be eligible for as a region. So that's great news. And then we had a report from our federal lobbyist talking about the bill that just passed out of the Senate, and really the opportunities for the region, as we go forward, assuming that the bill gets out of the House and then reconciliation on top of that. But I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on Speaker Pelosi to just move the bill as is, as opposed to trying to swing it back to the Senate again. So I think there'll be some griping, but I think ultimately that bill will pass as passed out of the Senate. Which will be a lot of resources coming to California. So we're looking forward to that.
And I was at Transit and Transportation.
I know
but
you were.
Thank you, Patty. You did awesome. Just one thing to add, at Transit, we did extend a reduction of fares for riding the El Dorado Transit buses. So students can ride free all over the county and to Sacramento for school or whatever else they want to. Discounts really all across the board. So it makes it very affordable. And if anybody's watching this at home, I encourage people to check it out because it's really, cost-wise, is really affordable now.
They do such a great job.
They do.
They really have our community in mind, and they try so hard to satisfy a lot of folks.
All right, moving on. Pardon me? Oh, wow. That was a while ago. Boy, I'm going to have to go back to my notes on that. I went to, I'm going to leave that one alone.
What are you talking about?
The Pioneer meeting. I went to that meeting, but I'm at a loss for what we talked about, but it was a really good meeting.
Good.
It was. It was really good, and I'm going to have to get back to you on that. So my apologies. One of the things that did come out of that meeting with Pioneer Community Energy is how detailed they are in supporting and finding ways to support the communities. And as we move forward with them, I feel very confident in their ability and desire to really serve the communities as opposed to just find cheap energy. And a lot of the things they're doing are programs that are not offered by PG&E and others, which I don't have at the tip of my fingers right now. But as we go into this process in the fall, and we start, really contemplating this full relationship with Pioneer Energy, I think you all see and feel and understand why I have the confidence I have in them. They're a great group of people. I talked to them about public outreach as they're moving forward, and they gave me a whole list of all sorts of things that they're doing with public outreach. And Sam, he's a director? Yes. Yeah, director. Yeah, he did he was very responsive, and I just feel I have a lot of confidence in him. So we'll see how that goes moving forward. All right. Request for future agenda items. I do have one. What I would like to do is I would like to get a report on what we're looking at for basically major objectives and issues that we're dealing with through the rest of the year. And as we are sitting here, we've had a lot of. And it doesn't need to, I'm not looking for a very extensive report, but just kind of the highlights of what we're looking at, what the staff is looking at for the rest of the year. We do have Pioneer Energy, we have some other things, but what does that look like in terms of staff time and energy? And as well as I want to make sure we're not piling on a whole bunch more so that we understand what's going on as well. And that's conversations that we don't always have when we start talking about new projects and ideas and things moving forward. So I don't know if I can get a nod on that or not. One thumb? That's all right.
I mean,
So-
we have all our upcoming items.
So-
I guess I don't understand specifically what you're asking.
It's kind of like a state of the state of kind of where we're at
Yeah.
for
A
I
lot
guess
of-
half the year.
We've been very reactive this good part of this year on issues and things that we've been dealing with. So kind of moving towards a proactive approach, and what does that look like for the rest of the year, so we can wrap our heads around what we're doing. I feel like we've done a lot of things that have been just reacting to all sorts of things going on.
Well, we have a lot on our plate after COVID, so.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm thinking about. So I got one nod.
Yeah, I'm good. Just
Okay.
checking with Cleve though, is this making more work for you to figure out how much work you have? But I do, we talked in the governance workshop about getting kind of a bird's eye view of what's coming down the pipeline so that we, have more time to research topics in depth or just kind of know what's, do outreach and talk to people in the community about things that might be upcoming.
And, we have
stuff
that
like that.
governance workshop coming up,
Yeah.
so that might,
Yeah.
we might be able to.
And it's like, we have a housing element. We're not going to have a full discussion on the housing element, but we're going to at least say we have a housing element. It's probably going to take a few meetings to discuss or what we're bringing forward. You're looking at me like, okay.
I think that what we can do is we can bring back something that says these are our major projects that each department is working on, and maybe it maybe include our top 3 or top 4.
Yeah. Are we
something like that.
really doing broadband? I don't know. Should the community know? These are things that they, in my mind, they should know what we're doing. And this
Sure.
would be a great template for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. You good? All right. And any other requests for future agenda items? Nope.
I have.
Yes. All right. Receive city managers and staff reports. City managers report.
I have a couple of items I want to mention to you and that I'll bring up. First of all, Kevin Brown on our Placerville Economic Advisory Committee is no longer there. He sold his business and has moving to Arizona. He's in transition right now, I believe.
No kidding.
And so rather than have you authorize us to recruit, we're going to go recruit, and we'll bring back a plan for you to interview those applicants for
Wow.
Economic Advisory Committee. He's one of our founding members. He's been on the committee since the beginning, so he'll
What
be
a
missed.
surprise.
So, anyway, second item, related to the Fire Safe Council, they had a flyer that they want to put out to the public. We are going to work with them and do a back-to-back flyer in our September utility bill. Want to let you know the back-to-back that we're doing is going to be in relation to a test of the Code Red system. I've been talking to Vice Mayor Taylor about that. We have got agreement from the county to do that. I've asked Chief Wren to work on that with the county and get that set up. We're basically going to send out this flyer with our September utility bill that said, this is how you sign up. We're going to do a test on this date. That the way that people know, if the test goes and you didn't get notified, you're not properly signed up. So hopefully we can get some feedback from that and encourage people. It's a process of encouraging people to sign up for Code Red. So we are moving forward with that. Just want to let you know that's happening.
Good idea.
The last item is you mentioned the housing element. We need to approve the housing element. We have some issues in that it is going to the Planning Commission. It's already been to the state. Pierre has addressed their comments, and it's going to the Planning Commission on August 17th. However, we don't feel that gives us time to turn that around for our August 24th meeting. So we are recommending that you hold a special meeting. I know how much you love those, on August 31st, which is a 5th Tuesday of this month. But we'd like to combine that with two things, and maybe a third. The two things are, the housing element is the most important, and I think Pierre's saying maybe 45 minutes to an hour to go through that item, or no more than that anyway. The second item is our ARPA funds that we've been discussing. It's time now. We have our first installment of about 1.3 million, right, Dave, that we've received. And we need to, not that we'd make a final decision necessarily at that meeting, but we'll have more recommendations for you and hopefully narrow that down and get public input and decide what we're going to do with those funds. The third item that potentially is there, I mentioned tonight on the homeless issue, that is going back to the Board of Supervisors on that same day, the 31st. So if you're in agreement and we have that prepared, that may be the opportune time to also consider that item at that meeting. That may make a fairly robust meeting, I think, but
Are you
in
talking
talking,
about a day meeting or a night?
we're looking at probably a 5 o'clock start time.
Oh,
So
good.
same time, same start time, because we want public input on all of those items. If we do it during the day, we might not get that, so.
And a special meeting, so we won't have all the other things.
Yeah, we won't have anything else on there. We don't do regular public comment, only comment on those agenda items. So if you are in favor of that, we'll get that scheduled and plan on that. There's something else I was thinking happening on that day.
31st?
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe
The video.
Oh, right, okay, but that's,
30th and
that won't be a big thing.
Okay.
We can work through that, so. Anyway, any comments or questions on that? If not, we'll move, yes.
I've got a comment. I just want to say I'm so happy to hear about the Code Red
Oh.
test. I've been, I don't want to use the word nagging, but that's the word that's coming to mind. Cleve and first Chief Ortega and then Chief Wren about running a test for the emergency communication since I've been on the council. So I'm really glad to see that coming up. So thank you.
All right, okay, that's it. And then, well, you have the other two reports are on there.
Yes, any further questions on that? Okay, we're going to receive and file the police report and the fire report, and if we have any questions for them, now was the perfect time.
I don't have any questions, but I do want to say that I want to commend you guys for National Night Out for appearing there. After fighting that fire all day, you all showed up in your nice, clean outfits, and you showered, and it was, I really do, I commend you. I mean, it would have been so easy to say, hey, you know what, we can't make it, and I really thank you for making that effort, you and all the rest of the guys.
All right. Thank you, Patty. And I appreciate the level of detail that you've stepped up your reporting and graphs and all that. I think it's very informative, and it's I like pictures. So they say 1,000 words, and They're almost like a picture, but it's a graph and it's a, pie charts and such, and I think they're very helpful, so thank you very much. Anything else there on that? I haven't, one good thing, I haven't lost my agenda this meeting. Okay, moving on. Upcoming items, I had one, let's see. We had the letter to go to, I think you talked about that, but the letter regarding online sales tax legislation, we were going to put that on the next agenda.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
You'd like that on the next agenda?
Yes, I mean, I think we should if we're going to send it, right?
There's two things. There's the letter, and then there's the resolution that is simply, what we normally do with the resolution is bring those back, and those will be on your next agenda. I asked, I don't know if I've asked each of you, I asked Regina, do we know, are any of you planning on attending the meeting?
The
conference, excuse me. Yeah.
I would like to, I've been meaning to email Regina today.
Okay, it looks like Michael, you are, so.
Yeah.
Two things, if you notice on here, we'll have you appoint a voting delegate for that
Okay.
meeting.
I would like to go, but I can't go Thursday, but I can go Wednesday and Friday. Can we do that?
I think there is a way to do that, yeah, yeah. Work with Regina on that, she can help get you
Okay.
signed up for it, so.
Because something else, Wendy's thing is-
So, yeah, we'll,
Yeah.
you'll have the opportunity to request that, how we vote on that resolution and direct. your
CSAC
vote.
went virtual. It was supposed to be in person, and they just switched it to virtual.
The virtual,
Oh, they did?
who knows, the league may change theirs too,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Wow.
We'll see how that goes. All right, number 17, adjournment. I would like to adjourn this meeting at, 8:54 PM.